Good morning and welcome to today's proceedings of the National Assembly on this 9th day of June 2020. The broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. You can stream this live broadcast on YouTube, courtesy of the Parliament of Kenya YouTube channel. This morning, the County Outdoor Advertising Control Bill, Senate Bills number 19 of 2018, is in the order of business. This is a Senate bill which has been debated for second reading in the National Assembly, and a question will be put. Members will be voting on whether or not this bill should proceed to the Committee of the Whole House. The County Outdoor Advertising Control Bill is a bill for an Act of Parliament to provide for a legal framework for the regulation of outdoor advertisement in the counties and for connected purposes. Also in the order of business this morning is a motion by the Chairperson, Budget and Appropriations Committee. The motion is on the report on the budget estimates for the financial year 2020-2021. This is for the general debate for the first allotted day. The Refugees Bill, National Assembly Bill number 62 of 2019, is also in the order of business this morning. This bill will be debated for the second reading. The principal object of this bill is to provide for the recognition, protection, and management of refugees, to give effect to the 1951 United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees, the 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees, and the 1969 OAU Convention governing the specific aspects of refugees' problems in Africa. The members of the National Assembly will be debating the report on the budget estimates. This House to adopt the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget estimates for the national government, the judiciary, and Parliament for the financial year 2020-2021, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 4th June 2020, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 221 of the Constitution of Kenya, Section 39 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and Standing Order 235 and 239 approves the issuance of a sum. If you're just joining us, the business of the National Assembly is about to begin, and now I will hand you over for this live broadcast. On your screen is the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Cheboy. My name is Edward Kabasa. Do enjoy your viewing.
Behold with your abundant favor as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to performance of important trust in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country, and of those whose interest you've committed to our charge. Amen. Other members, we have confirmed that we have quorum within the chamber and other holding areas, and therefore business will begin.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Under that particular order, we have the member for Kilifi South, Honorable Kitty Chonga, who wishes to present a petition. Are you ready? I am trying to see whether you are within the chamber. Is Honorable Chonga in the house? I don't see him, so we will proceed to the next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Leader, Majority Party.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Tuesday, 9th June 2020, in the morning sitting. Number 1 is a legal notice number 82 of 2020 relating to the Circle Societies non-deposit taking business regulations 2020 and the memorandum from the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Cooperative. And number 2 is a legal notice number 85 of 2020 relating to the health COVID-19 restriction of movement of persons and related measures for Mandera County, in bracket extension order 2020, and the memorandum from the Ministry of Health. And 3, legal notice number 89 of 2020 relating to the public health COVID-19 restriction of movement of persons and related measures, Nairobi Metropolitan Area, extension order number 2 of 2020, and the memorandum from the Ministry of Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Now, on this particular order, we have several members who wish to request for statements from chairpersons of various committees. And for good order, I think it would be important I mention all of them so that they will be within, within reach. We have the member for Malava, Honorable Malulu Ijendi. I want to confirm if he is in the House. I also want to confirm whether Honorable Member for Lamu County, Honorable Captain Rueda Abo, yes, member for Kandui, not Kandui, Wundanyi, Danson Mashako, and member for Bomet Central, Honorable Ronald Tanui. So let's start with the first one, if he is in the House. Honorable Malulu Injendi, is he in the House? Yes. Honorable Malulu. With the mask, it's very difficult to... Is that Honorable Malulu?
Mr. Speaker.
Okay, proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I raise my question, Mr. Speaker, I request that you allow me to congratulate Mheshimiwa Wangwe for appointment to the current position, and you, Majority Leader, and the rest of the persons who have been appointed to the positions or confirmed. I want to ask Mheshimiwa Wangwe that as he serves in this new position, he serves diligently, but he should also remember where we've come from, particularly us from Western Kenya, what we went through with the Jubilee. So as he climbs up, he should not forget us, particularly as Nisao Mimi.
Now, Honorable Injendi, obviously your target was your neighbor. Would it have been easier if you consulted with him quietly and asked him to, canvass specifically for what you require from him? But proceed, it's good. I mean, you have You have had your moment. Proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44.2C, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Lands regarding tribal conflicts over land along Nandi escarpment at the borders of Nandi and Kakamega counties. Honorable Speaker, there have been persistent conflicts over boundaries of individuals' farms along the Nandi escarpment that borders the Malava constituency and the Mosop constituency. The latest conflict was on 29th May 2020, and the tension has continued to date. Further, there have been conflicts in 1982, 1992, 2014, and 2017 over the same matter. Honorable Speaker, it's against this background that I seek a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Lands on the following. 1, what measures is the government putting in place to ensure that there is a clear demarcation of boundaries of farms and lands of persons owning pieces of land touching the boundary between Nandi and Kakamega County, or both? 2, when will the relevant ministry settle this matter with an everlasting solution, considering that the conflict has been persistent for so many years? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. I would be okay with if there is any member who wants to make an addition so that when it is referred to the committee, they could consider maybe slightly more than what the honorable member has requested. Is there any member? I do not see, because otherwise I would have seen an intervention. So we proceed to the next one, the honorable member for Lambu, Captain Abo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to provision of Standing Order 442C, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Energy regarding flooding in Lamu County occasioned by release of water in reservoir managed by Kenya Electricity Generating Company, KENGEN. Honorable Speaker, over the years, perennial floods have continued to ravage counties along Tana River Basin by having rain which include Lamu occasioned by KENGEN releasing excess water from reservoir. These floods have resulted into loss of lives, displacement of people, and destruction of property in various areas in Lamu County. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek statement from the chairperson, Departmental Committee on Energy on the following. 1, what measure has the government put in place to address the pledge and status of compensation of the resident affected by flooding occasioned by release and spillage from reservoir into Tana River that's affecting Lamu County? 2, what permanent solution is underway to prevent frequent spillage from the Seven Fork Reservoir? And when will the affected area be assisted to resettle a long-term plan to assist the flood victim in Lamu County? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, honorable members, that particular one, of course, is referred to the relevant committee, which is the Committee on Energy. The previous one is referred to the Lands Committee. So we'll go to the next member. That is the member for Wondanyi.
They need to say something on that.
Oh, sorry. Honorable members, we have somebody. Yes, I see there's a member who wants to make an addition there. And he has removed his card again. So is that Honorable Gaduri Murungi? Oh, Honorable Ario. Honorable Ario of Garsen. Honorable Ario. The problem is you do not place your card on the intervention slot. But what is the number of your seat anyway? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition to what Honorable MP for Lamu County has said, Mr. Speaker, this issue of floods is becoming a disaster in our 3 counties of Garissa, Tana River, and Lamu. Mr. Speaker, this House, we petitioned this House on the flooding which is caused by Kengen, and then the House passed the resolution so that those people can be compensated. Right now, Mr. Speaker, 3/4 of my constituency is flooded, is underwater. People are living in IDP camps. No tangible assistance from Kengen. They give short notices. Farms are being affected. Livestock are being swept by floods water. The settlement, the schools. Mr. Speaker, these things keeps on occurring, and this is not a normal flooding. So I urge this House to force the Kengen to compensate our people, because they are doing a lot of destruction, and as my witness, Dr. Pokose came with the Committee of Energy to witness the destruction that is happening in our area. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge this House to force Kengen, because the report is with the Committee of Implementation, to compensate our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next will be Honorable Pukose.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as a Committee of Energy, we visited his constituency. We also visited.
Please.
Just
take your seat, Honorable Pukose.
I just wanted to support the petition.
Just take my request. Take your seat. I have a good reason for it.
Okay.
Let me first give Honorable Sankok, because he probably will be having some issues that he would want to raise, and then he will be the last one on that particular one. So let's start with Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, we can understand natural disasters, but disasters caused by human error, we cannot understand, we cannot forgive. Because, Honorable Speaker, what is happening in Tana River County and most of those 3 counties is that it is disaster that have been caused by human error. And compensation is a must, and it's upon this House to come up with a legislative framework to make sure that next time anybody who cause loss of human error, cause loss of human life, is treated as a murderer, because they are murderers. If by negligence, omission, or commission you cause such a disaster that have affected those 3 counties, then you should be prosecuted. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Okay, Honorable Pukose. Well, again, Honorable Pukose, I think this being you'll still have to take your seat. And I give the member for, is that the member for Garsen? Not Garsen. Now you keep putting your hand up and you are not able to be, I'm not able to, because other than, I don't seem to see your name, any name other than the member for Garsen who's just spoken. So let's have Honorable Pukose.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the petition by, the statement by Honorable Member for Lamu is actually timely, but it is something that this House has dealt with. Our committee, when Honorable Ali Wario gave a petition on the floods that have affected, it affects the whole of lower down to Masinga Dam. And Masinga Dam is one of the dams that generates power for Kengen and supplies power to this country as a hydropower. And whenever the water levels are very high during rain seasons, you have floods affecting right from Garissa all the way down to along the Tana. And people are displaced, their livelihoods are seriously affected. Even where they live, their houses are flooded, and people have to move to high grounds. Honorable Speaker, I think this is something that it has to be dealt with finality, because if those people are to be assisted, then our committee made several recommendations, which are with the implementation committee. And among those recommendations is that these people must be compensated. Their livelihood we must be able to be moved to places where they are not prone to floods. Also, the government needs to have more dams on the lower down to Masinga so that these floods can be controlled moving forward. Also, the Adi and the Tana, the Tata, authority should be able to do some dikes down there to control those floods. So I think, Honorable Speaker, this is something that the House must be able to even allocate money for the compensation of these people whenever, and this, especially this time when we are talking about budget, if we need to assist the people of Tana. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. That one is therefore committed to the Committee on Energy. I'm not going to take any other intervention because you can as well take those particular concerns and issues to the committee. Yeah, because I've given you what is it, Honorable Waida? You have asked for a statement and you are going to be answered at the committee. What is it again? And you had your opportunity.
Speaker, nina point ya nidhamu. Member hapa amesema hii imejadiliwa hapa. Shida kubwa kama ameelewa statement ni kwamba walitaja Tana River, committee walitaja Tana River na Garissa. Lamu nimesoma ripoti yote, Lamu hawakuweka ndani. Sijui Lamu amefanya sisi ni tuende Somalia. Kwani Lamu si Kenya? Katika ripoti yenu mmeweka only Garissa na Tana River. Na Lamu watu yani mafuriko kila pahali. Shida kubwa matuletea kisha hamuhesabu Lamu. Sijui sisi Lamu watupeleka pahali gani?
Okay. Now that one you will argue very strongly like you've just done before the committee. I also see, so that nobody, what is it, Honorable Mudhama? Member for Lamu West.
Mr. Speaker, I want to put it very clear, just as what Honorable Captain Ryder has said. We are normally forgotten, and especially because Lamu West constituency is where we border with Garissa. And all this water coming, instead of being channeled to the initial or the former channel where it was going to the ocean, this water floods and spreads all over to Lamu West constituencies, affecting areas like Moa, Chalaluma, Didawaride, Pangani, and the likes. So, when it comes to the implementation, Chair, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the Committee of Implementation to consider that the negative effects are felt all along, all the way to Lamu, so that it does not only stop at Gariseni,
okay,
as it's supposed, as they thought. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, for both the member for Lamu West and the county women representative of Lamu, this has been referred to the Committee on Energy, not the implementation committee. So what it means is that since you are the one who asked the question will be directed to the effects this has on Lamu. There would be no reason why the committee cannot expand their thought back to Tana River County. But this one is specific, and therefore the question will be specific to Lamu, but can also have a general policy issue on also how the effect it has in Tana River. So on this one, there will be no, there should be no issue. You are the ones who have asked, you will be responded to in the particular committee, and you will raise all those other concerns there. But of course, since there are members of parliament from your neighboring county who have also raised concern, like Honorable Ario of Garsen, I believe when the committee will be answering or responding to your statement, they will also include their neighboring constituencies and generally even the Republic. Thank you very much. So we proceed to the member for Bomet Central. Oh, sorry. Member for Wundanyi first. You have the microphone. I think there is a problem with that microphone. Let's see if
Thank you, Mr. Speaker,
you are now okay.
for giving me this opportunity to present a statement regarding mining royalties and community development agreements. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44.2c, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee of Environment and Natural Resources regarding the share of royalties from mining activities of large-scale miners. Honorable Speaker, in the mining activities for large-scale miners, the Act establishes a ratio of sharing royalties 70-20-10 and the Community Development Agreements, CDAs, committees as a means to better define and manage relationships and obligations between mining companies and the impacted communities. Mr. Speaker, CDA plays a valuable role in managing the expectations of the broad range of stakeholders. Honorable Speaker, there has been a push and pull in the development of regulations to operationalize the 70-20-10 share of royalties. The National Treasury and the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining have been blaming each other for the inordinate delay since the passage of the Mining Act of 2016 and the subsequent adoption of the mining regulations of 2017. It is disheartening, Mr. Speaker, to see that a lot of mining activities are going on and yet host communities are still underprivileged and have the poorest of infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the people of the coast, and more so Taita Taveta, where I come from, Wundanyi constituency, have seen no benefit of their resources God has bestowed under their land. It is on account of this concern and the general disappointment of this section of our people that I seek a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on the following. 1, can the committee provide a list of all large-scale mining companies operating in the coast region and the amount paid by each as royalties since the enactment of the Mining Act 2016? 2, were royalties being paid prior to the Mining Act of 2016, and how much had each company paid by then in the coast region? Will the community ever get a share of these royalties? 3, can the ministry provide a tabulation of the actual share of royalties in shillings going to the 3 main beneficiaries as per the Mining Act? That is 70 to the national government, 20 to the county government, and 10 to the host community. Can the ministry give a clear roadmap and actual date that we shall operationalize the share of these royalties? More so, when we expect the community and the county allocation to be released from the central account at CBK. 5, what quantities of iron ore have been extracted annually in Kishushe location, Wundanyi constituency, for the last 10 years? Can the ministry inform us of the quantities moved/transferred by Wanjala Mining/Sangani after obtaining a court order, and how much royalties have been paid on this particular consignment? How is the 1% community share of total annual revenue safeguarded by the ministry as stipulated in the Mining Act? How much is due to the people of Kishushe, Wundanyi constituency since the Act came into force? And lastly, Mr. Speaker, which CDA, Community Development Agreement Committee, have been gazetted and which ones are outstanding in the coast? When do we expect inauguration of the ones gazetted? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. That one is referred to the Departmental Committee on Energy.
On environment.
Isn't that that is the committee you are interested?
No, on environment and natural resources.
This is mining, eh?
Yes.
Oh, yes. To the relevant committee, which is the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. So we'll go next to the member for Bomet Central, Honorable Tanui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44.2c, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing regarding the status and utilization of funds allocated for construction of Bomet Town, Kapkoros, Litain Road, Tenok Hospital Road, and the recently recarpeted Bomet Town roads to the bitumen standard in Bomet Central Constituency. Honorable Speaker, considering the measures that the government has put in place to ensure road contractors undertake projects as per the set standards, including blacklisting of contractors who fail to implement projects within the set standards, the roads in Bomet Central Constituency are impassable and in dire need for repairs and maintenance. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek for a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing on the following. 1. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that Bomet Town, Kapkoros Litain Road, the Noek Hospital Road, and the recently recarpeted Bomet Town roads are currently in a deplorable state full of potholes? What plans has the ministry put in place to repair the roads, noting that transit trucks picking cargo from Naivasha Inland Container Depot are using the mentioned road? Was the contractor which recarpeted Bomet Town roads paid for the shorter works? Would the Cabinet Secretary clarify which government road authority is in charge of this road? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one also is referred to the relevant committee, which is Committee on Transport. We will therefore go back to order number 4 and give an opportunity to Honorable Kitty Chonga, the member for Kilifi South, to present a petition. Proceed, the Honorable.
Thank you,
Kitty Chonga.
Mr. Speaker. I rise to present petition number 10 of 2020 regarding historical land injustice committed against indigenous people of Bipingo community. I, the undersigned, on behalf of the indigenous people of Bipingo community in Kilifi County, draw the attention of the House to the following. 1, that the community lands in Kilifi County is home to many indigenous residents as they are known as the ancestral land. 2, that since 1913, indigenous people of Bipingo community lands have been squatters on their land following compulsory acquisition of their land by British colonial government purportedly for public use. That the Bipingo community was forcibly moved out of the ancestral land but was neither compensated nor resettled, thereby rendering them vagrants and squatters on their own land. Sorry, Speaker. That upon attainment of independence in 1963, various communities across the country that had been dislocated from their, or dispersed from their ancestral land by the British colonial government were resettled and henceforth benefited from the restoration and retribution policies of the post-independence government. That, on the contrary, the Bipingo community never regained its ancestral land and instead lost the land to private entities on leasehold obtained under irregular circumstances, with subsequent governments failing to address the community's plight to date. That most of the leases under private hands recently expired but have subsequently been renewed, and the land subdivided and sold off once again to private individuals and companies instead of reverting back to the community. 7, that the indigenous, that the marginalization of the indigenous Vipingo community with regard to ownership of the ancestral land has taken its toll on members of the community, most of whom live on abject poverty due to lack of access to land for direct utilization or as collateral to secure credit facilities to uplift their livelihoods. 8, that efforts to address the matter with relevant authorities, including writing formally to the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Lands as well as the National Land Commission, have not borne much fruit. That the matter in respect of which this petition is made is not pending before any court of law or constitutional body. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, your humble petitioners pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee of Lands, inquires into the circumstances that led to irregular disposition of Vipingo community land from its indigenous owners by private entities with a view to reverting ownership of the said land to the indigenous people of Vipingo in Kilifi County. And finally, the committee makes any other recommendation it deems appropriate in the circumstances of this petition. And your petitioners will ever pray, presented by me. Thank you.
Very well. As I give, I can see there is a member who is interested to speak to this, Honorable Kositany, who wanted to speak to this. But for something slightly different, honorable members, when you come and speak to that microphone, we must make sure that we cover our nose and mouth. Particularly that particular microphone which the member has just used, because it is used by many members. So, and by the way, members, you can see I am doing very well with my mask fully, put on and properly put on. So, no member will be allowed to speak on that particular one, even with the nose outside the mask. We will not accept. It's a bit, if we are to exercise caution, the extreme caution will be starting from that particular microphone which many members use. Yeah? Now, I can see the Honorable Dawood has made a valid inquiry. For those members who are particularly blessed with reasonable face physiques, like the nose and others, also try and get a mask that will be, you can as well, those in the yesteryears when you had a big foot, they would ask you to go and take measurements in Limuru Bata. Now, I'm not so sure this one. I believe the one in Kitui, Kikotek, can produce that can satisfy any size of the nose. So, honorable members, let's move to the next order, but be very careful. On the members who will be coming to speak on that particular microphone, we will be very keen. Okay, next order.
Order number 8, the County Outdoor Advertising Control Bill, Senate Bill number 19 of 2018, second reading, question to be put.
Other members, having confirmed that we have the requisite numbers, I put the question, which is that the County Outdoor Advertising Control Bill, Senate Bill number 19 of 2018, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for a legal framework for the regulation of outdoor advertisement in the counties and for connected purposes. Order number 9, motion, report on the budget estimates for the financial year 2020-2021, general debate, first allotted day.
Now, the vice chair budget is the one moving it, and I have information that you want to move it in an amended form. If that is the case, which I think it is, you need to really clarify, particularly the issues that you want to move in that particular manner. So, Honorable Lesonet, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to move the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, like you said, Mr. Speaker, in amended form. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 48, I beg to move the motion in an amended form as follows, Mr. Speaker. That this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget estimates for the national government, the judiciary, and Parliament for the financial year 2020-2021, laid on the table of the House, Mr. Speaker, on Thursday last week, June 4th, 2020. And pursuant to the provisions of Article 221 of the Constitution of Kenya, Section 39 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and Standing Orders 235 and 239, approves the issuance of a sum of Kenya shillings 1,887 billion shillings, 470,995,757 from the Consolidated Fund to meet the expenditure during the year ending 30th June 2021 in respect of the votes contained in the first schedule, Mr. Speaker, and further makes the policy resolutions contained in the second schedule to the order paper, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that this first schedule contained in the order paper be replaced, Mr. Speaker, with a new schedule comprising of adjustments that have since been made by the committee, Mr. Speaker, which I will shortly table. Mr. Speaker, the schedule contained in the report referenced as the second schedule, and which contains financial recommendations, Mr. Speaker, be replaced with a new second schedule comprising of further adjustments that have since been made by the committee, which, Mr. Speaker, again, I will shortly be tabling, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and finally, that the necessary consequential amendments be effected in the schedules for consideration during the Committee of Supply, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is the import of the amendment, Mr. Speaker, in moving this report in amended form, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and as mandated, like I alluded to, Mr. Speaker, by Article 221 of the Constitution, Section 39(2) of the Public Finance Management Act and Standing Orders 235, it is my pleasure, Mr. Speaker, to present to this House the committee's report on the estimates of revenue and expenditure, Mr. Speaker, for the financial year 2020-2021, and the medium term for the national government, Parliament, and the judiciary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Mr. Speaker, is mandated by the various articles of the Constitution, 221, Section 5, Section 4 and 5, Mr. Speaker, and the Public Finance Management Act 2012, Mr. Speaker, to investigate, inquire into, and report on all matters, Mr. Speaker, relating to coordination, control, and monitoring of the national budget. Mr. Speaker, the committee is equally mandated to discuss, review the estimates, Mr. Speaker, and make recommendations, Mr. Speaker, to this wonderful House. Mr. Speaker, you'll realize part of the mandate of this committee earlier in the year was to review, Mr. Speaker, and report on the budget policy statement, which, Mr. Speaker, we adequately reported to this House. Mr. Speaker, the Budget and Appropriations Committee, again, will review bills related to the national budget, Mr. Speaker, including the Appropriations Bill. Mr. Speaker, The Budget and Appropriations Committee, again, as part of their mandate, evaluates the tax estimates, economic and budgetary policies and programs, Mr. Speaker, with direct budget outlays. Mr. Speaker, this committee, Budget and Appropriations Committee, has the mandate, Mr. Speaker, to examine, Mr. Speaker, a very important bill, the Division of Revenue Bill, Mr. Speaker, which you are well aware that already this House already approved it. Mr. Speaker, as I move this motion, I want to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Mr. Speaker, led by the chairman, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, Mr. Speaker, who has done a wonderful job, Mr. Speaker.
What is it, Honorable Omboko Milemba? Order, Honorable Lesonet.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and with due respect to the Chair of Budget, I don't intend in any way to scuttle this very important process. But will it not be in order, Honorable Speaker,
who is this member who is, coming in between the member given the floor to speak and the Speaker? Proceed.
Chair, Honorable Speaker, having correctly moved that this motion is being moved with an amendment, and the amendment relates to the schedule which he will be tabling. Would it not be in order that that schedule be tabled, and also, if possible, highlight the real aspects of those changes? Because last Friday, when we suspended this debate, it was because we were given the schedule as we had it originally, and we looked at it over the weekend, including the notes that we got from the table room, and we were armed with those documents. So, Honorable Speaker, could he then bring those changes, table them, and then also highlight them so that we are in tandem with him as he will be moving forward in his move? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Okay. Yes, what is it, Honorable Dr. Otiendo Amolo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not only do I support the sentiments by the Honorable Member for Muhaya, but also, Mr. Speaker, I notice, and this is a practice that has sometimes eluded us, when a motion is tabled on behalf of a committee, an amendment, which is said to be an amendment by the committee, Mr. Speaker, ought to reflect that. It ought to reflect signatures of the committee to avoid the dangers that the chairs or the vice chairs can actually move a motion or an amendment in the name of the committee, which may not always reflect the views of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let's hear from Honorable Lesonet. What do you have to say on that particular one?
Mr. Speaker, the fears of the honorable members, Mr. Speaker, including specifically the fears of Honorable Otiendo Amolo, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you note that before we table any motion, and particularly in amended form, Mr. Speaker, it requires the approval of your office, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this has been approved by the Speaker. The Speaker has interrogated the fears of those members, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, it is for the same reasons why we did not table the schedule on Thursday, the amended schedule on Thursday, is because we needed the concurrence of the members, which we were able to obtain yesterday, Mr. Speaker. We did a meeting yesterday, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the schedules and the minutes, including concurrence of all committee members, Mr. Speaker, are here with us, and equally they are also in room 8, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the honorable member for Emuhaya, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the details of the schedule, Mr. Speaker, the new schedule has been tabled, Mr. Speaker. And the honorable member should give his all entire attention, Mr. Speaker, on the new schedule now, the new Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, Mr. Speaker, which amends and replaces, Mr. Speaker, the schedule which was with the report on Thursday. So what the honorable member can do, Mr. Speaker, for now and because of time, is to rush, Mr. Speaker, to room 8
order again.
and be
I don't
able
know
to
why-
pick the
Honorable
replacement
Leader of
schedule.
Majority.
I think, Chair, you remember last week we asked, we had a report table with a schedule. And the committee, according to the chair, vice chair, they have met and they have done procedurally. It's now, I think, for you to order the table office and the clerk office, at least to circulate the new schedule, the new amended schedule. You know, the member is just talking about I've table. Even me, I need to see the new schedule, which has been amended by the committee on Monday.
Makes a lot of sense. Really, I think now the issues, is no longer with the committee, because they seem to have done their bit. The members who have raised concerns also have their right, because really they want to know that the committee is on board. Now, I was just interested to know whether, for example, the member for Emuhaya is a member of budget committee. If he is not, then his concerns are valid. He wants to know that the committee is on board, and now that we have confirmed from the mover that actually the budget committee has been involved in this particular amendment, it moves now, it behoves on the administration of Parliament to make sure that we have the amended schedule so that they can be up to speed. But the easiest way that you could do, Honorable Lesonette, is to clarify on your end, and since members, we are all, they will be able to really get the gist of the amendment, as we also make sure that we confirm that the committee was involved, which I'm sure it was. Proceed, Honorable Lesonette.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that direction and for that clarification. Mr. Speaker, the amendment to this schedule, Mr. Speaker, like you know, these are extremely very difficult times for this country and for the world at large, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we reached an agreement with Treasury that any votes which were not funded, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, when we received committee reports from committees, they actually convinced us that certain projects need to be funded, Mr. Speaker. And in our first schedule, we thought we could be able to agree with Treasury where we can get funding for such particular projects. And, Mr. Speaker, given that Treasury could not see where they can raise additional revenue to finance, Mr. Speaker, for example, an additional 500 million to Soin-Koru Dam, as an example, Mr. Speaker, which we thought they needed $1 billion for them to actualize that project, Mr. Speaker, we had to do a second schedule to reduce that amount to the original amount proposed by Treasury of 500 million, and many others, Mr. Speaker. We needed a cardiac catheterization machine in Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was no funding for that. That equal, Mr. Speaker, had to be reduced. But I want to invite members to pay particular attention, Mr. Speaker, to the schedule now as tabled. So, Mr. Speaker, the members of the committee have done a wonderful job, like I mentioned, led by Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, a wonderful chair, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had the privilege to sit in Budget and Appropriations Committee since inception in the 10th Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been a member in all parliaments, in the 11th Parliament, including this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and I really want to pay particular attention to the leadership of Kimani Ichung'wah for the last 2 years. He's done a brilliant job, Mr. Speaker. This chairing Budget and Appropriations Committee, Mr. Speaker, is a very, very difficult job. Mr. Kimani Ichung'wah, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, has been able to coordinate the membership of the committee, the interest of other committees, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, including the very, very difficult task of sharing revenues between national and county governments, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've always had a pull and push between ourselves and Senate, and Honorable Kimani has led that process nicely and without injuring any whether national government or county governments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, part of the membership, Mr. Speaker, include Honorable John Bandi, Mr. Speaker, the minority whip, Mr. Speaker. And you can imagine when you are leading a committee where you have the minority whip and the chairman of ODM. Mr. Speaker, we've heard in the committee, Honorable Richard Onyonga.
Now we need to clarify some of these things, Honorable Lesonet.
Mr. Speaker.
Now, you know, when you talk about minority whip being Honorable Mbadi,
Mr. Speaker,
I think you are treading on very dangerous grounds.
Mr. Speaker, the minority
just to help you, Honorable Lesonet.
Yes.
Honorable Mbadi, the Honorable Mbadi is the minority leader.
Correct.
You could still, you could attribute the leadership of a party to him.
Yes.
And also some accolades about the institutions he went to, and I'm sure that one is easier for you.
Yes.
You might have, interacted with him there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, includes Richard Onyonga, Mr. Speaker, in the committee, Mr. Speaker. You know we have Samuel Moroto, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member for Kapenguria, Millie Odhiambo, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have Twali Badi in this committee, Honorable Gideon Ochanda, Honorable James Kaguya, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Moses Kuria, Bernard Shinali, Mr. Speaker. I really want to recognize all members, John Mushiri, Jude Jomo, Corey Lemaine, Mr. Speaker, Sarah Korere, Honorable Nasula Lesuda.
No, Honorable Lesonet, if you recognize the membership,
I'm just about to finish, Mr. Speaker.
If you go to the details,
Honorable
then you take a lot of your time
Punyasi,
from
Mr.
dealing with
Speaker.
the substance.
So, Mr. Speaker, those are part of the wonderful membership, and I really want to thank the majority party and minority party, Mr. Speaker, for giving this committee such a strong and committed membership. Mr. Speaker, during this budget making, and Mr. Speaker, the members need to know very well that the biggest mandate for this House, Mr. Speaker, is to write the budget, Mr. Speaker. So even as we sit here today, we are actually performing the most important role of this House to write budget and agree spending, Mr. Speaker. That is the role of this House, Mr. Speaker. And they have done that wonderful job, Mr. Speaker, nicely for the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during this budget making...
What is it, Honorable Junet?
Mr. Speaker...
Order, Honorable Lesonet.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
I'm a bit lost, Mr. Speaker. The information the Vice Chair is giving the House and myself. He's saying the biggest mandate of this House, Mr. Speaker, is to write the budget. I don't know whether that is Tugan language, Mr. Speaker, because writing a budget, I'm unable to understand it, honestly speaking, Mr. Speaker.
It is your business, Honorable Lesonet, to find Honorable Junet.
Mr. Speaker.
But looking at that particular term, it looks to me like it's a right one.
Yes.
You know, it all depends on the background institution. Like, for example, yourself, I know the national school that you attended, I believe, that is where it gives you some English that is sometimes a little confusing. Now, find Junet somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree. I agree.
What is it, Honorable Otiende Omolo?
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Vice Chair is a seasoned member, so I'm sure he will sit down when I'm on my feet. Mr. Speaker, I truly respect the committee, the membership, and the various accolades given to the chair and its members. Obviously, there might be a reason for that, and we will come to that. But, Mr. Speaker, I am listening to the Vice Chair move this amendment to the motion. And the most important aspect in Standing Order 48 is that he's supposed to demonstrate to us that that amendment does not materially alter any principle contained in the original motion. Mr. Speaker, I am still waiting for that demonstration, not the accolades and individual standing of the members.
Honorable Tiende is absolutely right. And remember, that is I'd asked you to do that. It's easier for you to do all the rest after you have actually shown these particular amendments. Looking at it very easily myself, I see that there is about some, from what you are moving and what is in the order paper, there is a difference of just slightly above 5 billion. I'm not so sure if that is the position. And that's what I've also been waiting for. Because when you mentioned about the figures, there was some amount which were on top or something like that. So I want you to go straight there so that as the members internalize this, they will be able to, now debate that particular motion with full knowledge. And I think Honorable Dr. Amolo is absolutely right. So Honorable Lesonet, please go to that particular bit.
Mr. Speaker, I promise to come to that before I conclude my remarks on this particular motion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you rightly put it. Honorable Junet, Mr. Speaker, is arguing on writing the budget. Honorable Junet, that's exactly what we do, to write the budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we did public hearings, Mr. Speaker, and out of the public hearings, Mr. Speaker, after listening to various Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, there's an adjustment of 1.2 billion shillings to this budget to accommodate issues of public hearing, Mr. Speaker, to cover 12 counties. Among them, Mr. Speaker, Tana River County, Garissa County, Mr. Speaker, Kitui, Murang'a, Turkana County, Samburu, Kericho, Narok, Busia, Homa Bay, Kisii, and Kwale, Mr. Speaker. It is a provisions in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, that makes it mandatory that public hearing must be done. And we are demonstrating by putting additional resources to these 12 counties, which, Mr. Speaker, participated in the public hearing. Mr. Speaker, in this report, Mr. Speaker, being very, very difficult times, Mr. Speaker, you will realize there are additional resources, 53 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker, popularly referred to as economic stimulus, Mr. Speaker. In this economic stimulus, Mr. Speaker, including to support, Mr. Speaker, the farmers through including irrigation, Mr. Speaker, household irrigation, Mr. Speaker. A whole 2.6 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker, has been allocated so that households can be able to do their own irrigation schemes from their own homes, from their own farms, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform this House that following robust discussions in the public sphere, the national government submitted a follow-up document for incorporation into the budget outlining a post-COVID-19 economic stimulus program, Mr. Speaker, so that when this, once we are done, Mr. Speaker, with this COVID-19, at least our economy can still rejuvenate. Mr. Speaker, the macroeconomic framework underpinning the 2020-2021 budget, Mr. Speaker, is anchored on a GDP growth projection, Mr. Speaker, of 4.2% in the 2020-21, based, Mr. Speaker, on a 2.5% growth projection in this 2020, and approximately 5.8% growth in the 2021. Mr. Speaker, the financial year 2020-2021 covers a half of this year, Mr. Speaker, and half of next year, and those two growth projections, Mr. Speaker, will give us that average of 4.2%. Mr. Speaker, though quite small and relative to the required economic stimulus, the proposed economic stimulus, Mr. Speaker, is a good start. The program is proposed by His Excellency the President includes, Mr. Speaker, the Kazim Taani program, which has already kicked off, Mr. Speaker. There is already recruitment in various sub-counties and constituencies of youths to participate in this Kazim Taani in the various towns and urban centers in this republic, Mr. Speaker. You'll find them under the CARA program, Mr. Speaker. You'll find them under the the Kura program, Mr. Speaker, and also, Mr. Speaker, in the water sector, there are resources in this budget to support what we are calling, Mr. Speaker, Kazi Mtaani, so that, Mr. Speaker, the effects of unemployment, because we know, Mr. Speaker, with this COVID-19, we've seen so many people losing their jobs. Mr. Speaker, during deliberations with the departmental committees, it emerged that the issue of pending bills, Mr. Speaker, continues to persist despite the government's commitment to clear all pending bills early this year. Mr. Speaker, indeed, many of the pending bills have no proposed budgetary provisions, Mr. Speaker, while some of them are being litigated in our courts. Meaning, Mr. Speaker, there's a possibility if we don't pay particular attention to this matter, this item of pending bills, Mr. Speaker, we are likely to see the courts making pronouncements on this budget, Mr. Speaker. Notable pending bills, Mr. Speaker, include those linked to the IBC as well as to the registrar of political parties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution has prescribed the percentage that should go to political parties, and we've not been able to meet that percentage, Mr. Speaker. And if we are not able to meet, Mr. Speaker, maybe it is possible that in future amendments of the Constitution, it can be one of the items that can be looked at so that we can put a figure, Mr. Speaker, that can be afforded by Kenyans. It looks like for now, we are not able to afford the amount that goes to the registrar of political parties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the flood mitigation, it is disappointing to know that very little resources, Mr. Speaker, have been allocated towards this cause. Mr. Speaker, recent statistics by the Devolution Ministry have placed the flood-related death toll at 289, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you will notice that we've lost more people due to floods than COVID-19, Mr. Speaker. And this is an area, Mr. Speaker, we need to pay attention. That attention, Mr. Speaker, as a small demonstration in this budget, in that 500 million, Mr. Speaker, has been allocated so that the floods in Nyando can be mitigated by the construction of the Soin-Koru Dam, Mr. Speaker. And we hope that the ministry will fast-track the procurement process for that Soin-Koru so that in not very a long time, Mr. Speaker, the floods in Nyando will be a thing of the past. Mr. Speaker, analysis of the list of projects reveals that some projects have been allocated resources despite having been finalized, Mr. Speaker. That was a serious observation by this committee, Budget and Appropriations. Treasury, Mr. Speaker, informed that this is on account of pending financial obligations after the projects have been physically completed, Mr. Speaker. That tells you, Mr. Speaker, we have several projects. They have been completed, Mr. Speaker. They are in use. But, Mr. Speaker, we are yet to complete their payment. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk a bit, Mr. Speaker, on the financing of this budget. The budget for 2020-2021, Mr. Speaker, has to be financed, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury projects that ordinary revenue, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that will not be a very difficult English word for members, that ordinary revenue, Mr. Speaker, will amount to 1 trillion shillings, 621 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker. That is revenue, Mr. Speaker, which will be collected from us Kenyans and businesses in Kenya. That is a decent amount, Mr. Speaker, 1.6 trillion shillings, Mr. Speaker. 14.4%, Mr. Speaker, this, Mr. Speaker, translates to 14.4% of GDP. And, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. Speaker, needs to do a better job. Collecting 14.4% of GDP is still below the international standard, Mr. Speaker, which is around 20%, Mr. Speaker. So meaning there is pilferage, there is still loss of revenue, Mr. Speaker. If 14% is 1.6 trillion, you can imagine the shortfall of 6%, what amount it is, Mr. Speaker. It is not less than 500 billion, Mr. Speaker, which we are telling the Kenya Revenue to really pull up their socks, to identify those Kenyans who are not paying revenue so that they can be able to meet the international target, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 1.6 trillion is not enough, Mr. Speaker, to finance this particular budget, the trillions I mentioned, Mr. Speaker. And that is the reason why, to finance this budget, there will be support from bilateral donors, Mr. Speaker. To finance this budget, there will be a lot of domestic borrowing, Mr. Speaker. To finance this budget, there is even a possibility, Mr. Speaker, of this country even raising what is popularly called a Eurobond, so that this budget, this expenditure, Mr. Speaker, of 3 trillion shillings can be supported. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal deficit, Mr. Speaker, is projected, Mr. Speaker, at 7.3% of GDP, and this indicates a widening scenario from the previous projection, Mr. Speaker, of 4.9%. Mr. Speaker, it's very easy to understand why the fiscal deficit will grow to 7.3%. It's basically the revenue collection, Mr. Speaker, this financial year will be depressed for the obvious reasons of COVID-19 and the related consequences. So, Mr. Speaker, going forward, we encourage Treasury to continue working hard so that they can bring the fiscal deficit, Mr. Speaker, to the desired level of 3%. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude by, if you add me one more minute, Mr. Speaker, to just talk about the Consolidated Fund Service, Mr. Speaker. These are mandatory payments, Mr. Speaker, Consolidated Fund Service. These are payments, Mr. Speaker, which have priority over any other payment, Consolidated Fund Service, Mr. Speaker. And this includes pensions, Mr. Speaker. Those must be paid before any other payment. Mr. Speaker, this includes loan repayments, interest repayments, Mr. Speaker, and, Mr. Speaker, and even payments on maturity of treasury bills and other bonds. Mr. Speaker, the public debt alone, which is mandatory, the public debt servicing, Mr. Speaker, is estimated this year to be 904 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker. 904 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, interest payments accounts for 51% of the total debt service. And Mr. Speaker, that tells this House there's a lot which we all need to do to address this matter of public debt, Mr. Speaker, so that we can bring it to the level that is manageable. And Mr. Speaker, if we succeed to manage this public debt, it will release additional resources and more resources, Mr. Speaker, to development, to the development vote. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, if we don't manage this, very soon, Mr. Speaker, you will find maybe entire 50% of budget going to debt servicing. Mr. Speaker, this House should therefore note that debt sustainability analysis focus for
Honorable
2020.
Lesonet, your time is actually over. I kept adding you a minute, but I can see you are beginning to. I think what you could do is to leave the next bit to your
Thank you.
seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You are right. Let me leave the next bit of this wonderful document to the next one. And Mr. Speaker, with those remarks, I beg to move.
Okay.
And ask Mr. Speaker,
now between
the
yourself
Honorable
and
Kimani
your
Ichung'wah
between yourself and your seconder.
to second.
Now you are seconder because you've taken your seat. The membership of the House is very interested in seeing some line items. You know, if we could get some explanation on the line items that probably have been amended. That would be a good a bit. It will resolve the issue of Honorable Dr. Amolo and probably the Honorable Member for Emuhaya. So as the seconder does that, and if you do it well, probably add a minute or two for you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was actually going to request that you do add me 5 minutes just to enumerate.
What is it? What's your point of order? He has not even started. Member for Mogotio. Yes.
There's this issue of bending fields, Mr. Speaker. As we know, those who have been participating in budgeting, we know that every ministry is supposed to factor in pending bills at the first instance.
To my mind, I think you are anticipating. So I do not want you to go that direction. Well, if at the end of the day, he will not have captured issues that you really think he should have, you will have your day in Parliament. You will say it yourself and probably make those kind of observations. Honorable. Why don't we hear it from the donkey's mouth? Yeah?
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I was actually about to beg, thank you for your indulgence. I wanted to ask that you add me 5 minutes. Just to enumerate some of the changes that the Vice Chair was not able to enumerate in relation to the question that Honorable Atieno Moro did ask. And if you look at the first schedule that we tabled together with the report, Honorable Speaker, there were changes in the security department, the Committee on Internal Security.
We want to make sure that whatever you say is captured because it becomes part of the record. Now I think it is clearer now and better.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was saying, if you look at the first schedule that we did table last week, and the schedule that has just been tabled, some of the key changes that you note are in the security sector because there were reallocations that the committee had done, especially in relation to the National Integrated Management System, NIMS, the Huduma number question of about 500 million, which has since been plowed back into the budget, and they have done further reallocations, getting from operations and maintenance of the headquarters under the IG's office and reallocated to DCI to help with operations and other areas, and all that is reflected in the schedule. Under agriculture, there is 650 million that related to e-voucher that has also been plowed back, that had been, again, were reallocations from the ministry. There is an additional 2.6 billion shillings that came under the irrigation department, the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, money that is going towards irrigation projects, and part of that is also the 500 million shillings that the Vice Chair has referred to going to Soin Koru Dam, which will help in the mitigation of floods, Honorable Speaker. The parliamentary budget is also one of the other issues that have been affected, Honorable Speaker. The Parliamentary Service Commission budget, we have had, Honorable Speaker, appreciating that in view of the dire circumstances of the economy is under the strain of revenues falling, Honorable Speaker, and the challenges of this COVID pandemic, we appreciated that many members of Parliament and indeed many people in government will not be able to travel this year and the next financial year, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, we did take measures to sacrifice from the parliamentary budget a figure of about 2.5 billion shillings from foreign travel, appreciating that the world is on lockdown, Honorable Speaker, and people will not be able to travel. And we're able to plow back this money to help reduce the deficit that is there. And also, Honorable Speaker, to allow members, because again of the effects of post-COVID, in our own constituencies, to allow members to have a 10% increment in terms of salaries and wages for their staff in the constituency offices, and also to support office operations at our constituency levels, Honorable Speaker. Those basically capture most of the changes that will be reflected in the schedule, Honorable Speaker, and I think that answers what the question the two members did raise. Honorable Speaker, as I second, first, allow me, Honorable Speaker, to appreciate again the support that I've gotten in the last 3 or so years as Chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and my Vice Chair having the opportunity to move this last budget, Honorable Speaker, is part of the succession planning, Honorable Speaker, that any member of this House is able and capable, and they have the capacity to lead a committee and be able to shepherd us through a budget process. And I want to assure you, Honorable Speaker, that even as I leave office as chair, we have a very able committee, and I must immensely thank the members of this committee who have supported me over the last 3 years. And also generally this House, because I have had the opportunity to interact with the majority of members of this House through their departmental committees and be able to balance the needs and the resources available, Honorable Speaker, to us. And I must thank the House for the support that I've gotten over the last 3 years. I am still in this House, Honorable Speaker. I will support and I will continue to support the incoming chair and the leadership of the Budget and Appropriations Committee and all other committees of this House, because Chair, as the Vice Chair, Honorable Speaker, as the Vice Chair has mentioned, this House is charged with a singular mandate of budgeting for this country, what the Minority Whip could not understand about writing budgets. And it's good English to write a budget, because that is what this House is charged with, that responsibility to do. And as the country's representatives of the people and elected leaders, we hold the power of the purse, Honorable Speaker. And it is our duty and responsibility to provide strategic guidance and direction for the distribution of resources in a manner at a time like this, Honorable Speaker, when we are faced with a health pandemic, a huge humanitarian and economic crisis, Honorable Speaker, to be able to distribute resources in a manner that mitigates the effects of COVID-19 on the economy and the livelihoods of the people that we represent. And Honorable Speaker, you will remember when the budget estimates were tabled at the end of April this year, I did stand on a statement, Honorable Speaker, and raise concerns that the national government had tabled estimates of a very ordinary budget under very extraordinary circumstances. And we took issue, Honorable Speaker, with the fact that the estimates as were tabled then did not reflect the realities of our economy today and the realities of our country today. And I'm glad, Honorable Speaker, following that and following robust engagements by members of public and members of parliament through our various committees and other fora, the national government, through His Excellency the President, were able to come back to this House and present an amended version with amendments to the estimates that created an economic stimulus package of about 53 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, which is a good thing for a start. It is small, Honorable Speaker, for an economy like this, but it is a good start. The challenge, therefore, Honorable Speaker, that we are faced with as a country today is to be able to utilize the 53 billion shillings, one, to mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 on our economy, and the humanitarian crisis that this, and economic crisis that this pandemic has caused. Two, Honorable Speaker, is to be able to use this package to stimulate economic growth. And I appreciate what the Honorable for Mogotio is asking about pending bills. And if you read the report, Honorable Member for Mogotio, you will see, I think it's point number 15, we are speaking about the question of pending bills. Appreciating as a committee that this is a matter that none other than His Excellency the President pronounced himself on as early as June of 2019 and directed all MDAs and governments, including county governments, to settle pending bills. Honorable Speaker, it is in our statutes that pending bills are the first charge to our exchequer. That, Honorable Speaker, has not been honored, and indeed, we are proposing in this report, Honorable Speaker, on clause number 15 of this report, that maybe it is time. The Honorable Member for Mogotio, you took the challenge from this report and proposed legislation that will criminalize the non-payment of pending bills by government officers. Because, Honorable Speaker, you are aware why we get into these things. People are hesitant to pay what is old and are very quick to get into new deals because of what comes with the procurement processes in this country, Honorable Speaker. And if we are intent on fighting corruption in this country, it must begin from the procurement process and in the payment and settlement of pending bills in government, Honorable Speaker. And I think we have a challenge as a House to be able to help government and the people of Kenya, especially the business community, to deal with the question of pending bills, Honorable Speaker. I was saying, Honorable Speaker, the economic stimulus package has come in handy. Part of that economic stimulus package is some 10 billion shillings that has been provided towards the payment, settlement of pending bills, I think about 4 billion shillings and about almost 6 billion shillings towards settlement of VAT claims that are owed to the business community in this country. Honorable Speaker, there will be challenges in the next financial year. Our revenues have been badly battered and will be battered by this pandemic and the humanitarian crisis that has created a situation where people are not able to work. I am glad that with the partial opening up now, at least of the curfew, people now can have a full day, a full day's work up to 5 p.m. But you must also appreciate that there are people, there are mama mbogas, there are mama chapatis, there are mama githeris who cook githeri and go to vend around our shopping centers in the evening up to about 9, 10 p.m. and those people are not able to engage in economic activities, and therefore our economy, our revenues will be badly battered by this pandemic, and we must therefore, as a house, as a budget-making house, rise to the occasion and be able to assist where we can in being creative, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that our economy is opened up and our people are back to work, that our revenues are not as beaten as they will be. I say the economic stimulus package, 3 billion shillings going towards the tourism sector in terms of the Tourism Finance Corporation being able to advance loans to our hospitality industry is a good start, but it is not enough. 3 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, in that sector, with hotels closing down, Honorable Speaker, we need much more. And therefore, we must be more creative in how we'll be able to raise revenue, how government will be able to raise, and that brings me to the subject of our public debt, Honorable Speaker. We have said, and we have said it in this report, Honorable Speaker, it is time that the government of Kenya enters into negotiations with our lenders to be able to renegotiate our debt, Honorable Speaker. We can save in this year alone, just on interest redemption alone, we can save up to about 180 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. If we're able to renegotiate our loans, Honorable Speaker, we would be able even probably to save out of the 800 billion shillings that we'll be paying, maybe we can save 300 or 400 billion shillings and be able to plow back that money to be able to stimulate economic growth for our country, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we must also be careful what kind of public debt we enter into. We are confronted with a situation, Honorable Speaker, where our national treasury, as much as I will not tell you, are careful on whether to engage with on debt renegotiation, especially with the G20 countries, because of the kind of commercial debt that we got ourselves into in yesteryears, Honorable Speaker. We have spoken to this as a Budget and Appropriations Committee in the last 3 reports, or almost 3 to 4 reports that we have done on the annual estimates and supplementary budgets, that we must have a very good balance between our commercial debt and what is concessional debt, Honorable Speaker. The new Cabinet Secretary did commit last year, and we will wait to see whether he will actualize what he said, that increasingly we'll move away from commercial debt to concessional loans, Honorable Speaker. These commercial debts are what probably are making it difficult for us to be able to go and renegotiate our debt with G20 countries that have already offered to renegotiate debt and allow us some fiscal space. Honorable Speaker, the question of revenues will also be affected, Honorable Speaker, by the depressed private investments in this country with the COVID pandemic. Our own investment of public investments in terms of our development expenditure will be reduced, and therefore our revenues will not perform as well. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, we will be confronted later in the year with a situation where we may have to relook into this budget, and I foresee maybe in the next 2 to 3 months, we may have to review part of these estimates and budget that we have done now, Honorable Speaker, because as I said, Honorable Speaker, it was disappointing that from the word go, the National Treasury never reflected the realities of today's issues, the issue of flooding, but I'm glad after we raised that issue here on the floor of this House, Honorable Speaker, they came back, they have provided money for flood mitigation, as the Honorable Vice Chair said, in Nyando, in parts of Garissa and Tana River areas that flood. They have provided more money towards irrigation projects that will also help in the creation of dams, especially even in Asal areas and parts of Migori, where they will be able to use water, harvest water, Honorable Speaker, that would otherwise go to flood and ravage settlements where people are living, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in terms of our challenges moving forward, Honorable Speaker, and solutions, it is up to this House, Honorable Speaker, to rise to the occasion. We have spoken about fiscal consolidation in the past, but this year, Honorable Speaker, or rather the next financial year, this fiscal consolidation must go beyond talk. We must actualize real and actual fiscal consolidation to ensure that we continue to reduce on our budget deficit so that we borrow less. And you can see, Honorable Speaker, where our public debt situation is today.
Now your time
and if you're not able to consolidate...
Your time is over. I've actually added you 2 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me close with that. Yeah. And Honorable Speaker, just by closing, mention that over time, and when we did the supplementary budget 2 of 1920, we raised the issue of abuse of the use of Article 223 of the Constitution. We have raised the same issues in this report and other reports that we have raised before, that as a House, Honorable Speaker, we must put our foot down to ensure that every expenditure by government is brought to this House, and this House is able to oversight each and every expenditure, including the COVID funds. We did indicate in this report, and members who go through the report will be able to see that we want to ensure that all resources, including those from the COVID fund, are appropriated by this House. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second and again take this opportunity to thank all the honorable members of this House and the Kenyan people, and more especially the people of Kikuyu who donated my time and the resource in me to be able to serve the people of Kenya as chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee the last 3 years. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Okay. Honorable members, I want to propose a question, which is that, so I'm going to propose a question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the budget estimates for the national government, the judiciary, and Parliament for the financial year 2020-2021, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, June the 4th, 2020, and pursuant to provisions of Article 221 of the Constitution of Kenya, Section 39 of the Public Finance Act 2012, and Standing Orders 235 and 239, approve the issuance of some 1,887,470,995,757 from the Consolidated Fund to meet the expenditure during the year ending 30th June 2021 in respect of votes contained in the first schedule, and further makes the policy resolutions contained in the second schedule to the order paper. Now, honorable members, I hope you saw the difference in terms of the figures. And members, I will give you an opportunity on the basis of your placing of the card here, because it is a bit difficult for me to, I cannot, it's not easy to know who is who. Many of the members, of course, have longer hair now, and they have covered their mouth. Like, for example, nominee 001, he never used to have hair, he has them now, and others. So I can only use the card. It's very difficult, and you see again, we have a problem with the sitting arrangements. Where members used to sit before, they are not sitting there anymore.
Mr. Speaker, is this to say that I can continue?
No, not at all. Is there anything that was not completed? Let me confirm that. Of course, Honorable Pukose is right. I have done up to a particular area, and I will proceed. But even as I proceed, I want it to be confirmed that the tabling is today. That is the 9th day of June 2020. So I'll proceed, honorable members. That, again, the first schedule contained in the order paper to be replaced with a new schedule comprising of the adjustments that have been made by the committee and tabled today, 9th June 2020. 3, that the schedule contained in the report referenced as the second schedule, and which contains the financial recommendation, to be replaced with a new second schedule comprising of further adjustments that have since been made by the committee. Lastly, that the necessary and consequential amendments be effected in the schedules for the consideration during the Committee of Supply. Now, and honorable members, we will start, of course, with the leader of majority and followed by the leader What is your point of order, Honorable Otiende Amolo?
Mr. Speaker, I want to seek your direction on a little matter. The original report at page 20, paragraph 65A, Roman 2, had a certain provision in respect of how to treat the economic stimulus provisions. In this report, I see it crossed and countersigned, presumably by the chair. The amendment,
which page?
Page 20. Page 20 of the report.
Of the report?
Yes, of the original report. Paragraph 65A, Roman 2. It is crossed by hand and countersigned. Yes. And I see that that particular paragraph is not covered in the amendment. I want to seek your direction whether we should take it that the crossing by hand and countersigning means it is not part of the report, or it is a way of seeking to amend that report. I just wish to know what the position is.
If it is crossed and countersigned, that is there for the report. Now,
it's not there.
And that's my thought. I mean, if it has been countersigned, it means it's part of the report. Which are the issues that you think could have been captured that probably you would have an issue with?
No. Mr. Speaker, I am asking your direction to find whether that crossing and countersigning means it's expunged, or whether it is still required to be moved as an amendment to be expunged. That's all I'm asking.
It is expunged.
Very well.
It's expunged, so you ignore it.
Then I'm fine with that.
Well, what is it again, Honorable Member for Kikuyu?
Honorable Speaker, I think the Honorable Otiende Amolo has a very legitimate concern because this particular recommendation was anchored on reallocations that had been done, but you will appreciate that this report, Honorable Speaker, the original report was to be tabled on the 2nd of June, but we were not able to table this report on 2nd of June because of particular amendments that we are not agreed on with the National Treasury. Consequently, Honorable Speaker, part of those amendments related to funds like what is provided for under the economic stimulus for purchase of desks for schools, the construction of classrooms in 300 secondary schools across the country. And the understanding by the departmental committee before was, and the recommendation was that these funds be channeled through NGCDF. But the National Treasury did come and explain to the Budget and Appropriations Committee that the intention of the economic stimulus package was to have this centrally managed under the Ministry of Education and deliver a full package of a classroom and the desks in the classroom. And therefore, it was not feasible to have that particular amendment reflected in the schedule. And therefore, you will not find money going into NGCDF for the 300 secondary schools or for the school desks. And that is what necessitated that beautiful signature you see there, Otiende Amolo, is my signature.
You know,
and the crossing means it is not part of the report because it is the same signature, as you will see, that has signed the report. Therefore, it is not a part of the report.
And remember, Honorable Member for Kikuyu, I had added you 2 minutes. But now from the back door, you have used Honorable Otiende's concern to add yourself another 3 minutes from the back door. Now, you will not be allowed to do that again. Now, let's proceed. You know, I don't want you to talk about the schools you went to, Honorable, Ishungwa, because it is a school which was in your locality. I'm not so sure whether you went there by merit or on affirmative action. Now, because being a school in the locality, so let's have the leader of majority, please. And the leader of majority has 10 minutes. The leader of minority will also have 10 minutes. The rest of the membership, 5 minutes each.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker will not go back to the schools. Let me support on the onset the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the estimates of expenditure and revenue of the national government, the judiciary, and the parliament. Speaker, and I think it's good for the people of Kenya to know that we are doing this in compliance with the Constitution, Article 221 and Section 39 of the PFM Act, where the minister must present to Parliament the estimates of expenditure and revenue by April 30th. And again, Section 39 says, whatever we do, this report must reflect the Division of Revenue Act and the resolution that this House adopted in as far as the budget policy statement is concerned. What does that mean? It means if there will be an increase in expenditure in any proposed appropriation, it must be balanced by a reduction in expenditure in another proposed appropriation. So this budget must balance. This budget must balance, and I think that's where we're heading. Mr. Speaker, today is the beginning, and I'm sure we'll go the whole day discussing the budget. And based on the approval of this House, of this report, is what the Minister for Finance will use to come and tell the country and the House his budget 2020-2021 highlights on Thursday afternoon. Speaker, first I want to thank the Budget and Appropriation Committee and the Departmental Committee who were involved, and the Budget Office, led by Ms. Makau, who spent a lot of time in the production of this report. Speaker, this is a very, very unique year, and this is a very unique budget. This budget has been prepared against a backdrop of the ongoing global COVID-19 pandemic. The floods that are also ravaging our country in western part of Kenya and in the lower parts of Garissa, Tana River, and Lamu, and many, many other parts. And above all, this budget has also been prepared at the backdrop of the locust invasion. But most significantly, this budget is being prepared at the backdrop of the economic challenges. The economy is stressed. The economy is facing a lot of challenges. And drafting the budget 2020-2021 was therefore to comprehensively, Mr. Speaker, respond to the crisis, whose again, its timeline and its depth is unknown. We don't know when this COVID-19 will end. Hopefully, we have at least know when the floods will subside, and I'm sure the Minister for Agriculture must be fighting the locust and the eggs that they usually lay. Speaker, so Kenya is part of the global economy, and both globally and domestically, the economic activities have significantly been disrupted. And that disruption has led to uncertainty, has led to instability, affecting key parameters of any economic growth. And these parameters is the overall economic performance. Tax collection by the taxman has significantly reduced in the last quarter. Both public and private investment has slowed down. The current account balance is not looking very good. The personal incomes of our people is at its lowest, and there is unemployment in our country today. So this ripple effect of the health pandemic on the Kenyan economy, Mr. Speaker, has been visible in terms of reduced export earnings, because we are not exporting anymore. We have got very few business operations, and we want to thank government that now with the new adjustment to the curfew, companies and the people of Kenya at least can work from early morning, 7 o'clock, all the way to 5. There is increased unemployment. Many people have been laid down. And I think this House must speak to companies like Fairmount, who, because not of a reason that is coming from the workers, are sending Kenyan employers home. They are sacking them. There's declining consumer demand. So all this put together, you see, the financial year 2020-2021 will not be looking very good. Speaker, the COVID-19, we had a 2019-2020 supplementary 2 budget, which was attempting to address the COVID-19 related expenditures. The interventions were not very comprehensively addressed. And the only reason was that the availability of resources was not there. There was revenue shortfall, as well as there was little time which was left for the end of this financial year. So what has the government done? Because we must address the effects, the economic effects, the social effects, the health effects of the COVID-19. And that's why the Jubilee administration under President Uhuru Kenyatta, in particular, has developed a comprehensive stimulus package totaling to 53.7 billion, which is geared to address and take care of our vulnerable groups during these difficult moments. And I really want to state it here today that I am sure the 53.7 billion will not be stolen, because the people who need it, and accounting officers must listen to the House, the people who need it are people who need it at the most critical moment of their life. If it is the money we are sending, the 14.3 billion we are sending to enhance the liquidity of the business, the refunds, the VAT refunds, all to local businessmen, the payment of pending bills. Mr. Speaker, I think the Budget and Appropriation Committee and this House must speak to pending bills, whether it is to the common small business and medium enterprises, whether it is to corporates. VAT refunds and pending bills must be paid so that there's money in our small businesses. There's 10 billion allocated under the emergency comprehensive stimulus package that is supposed to empower the youth and create for them employment under the Kazi Mtaani program in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, among others. There's 6.5 billion towards improving educational infrastructure, classrooms. Some of my colleagues will agree with me that some of the schools in Western Kenya, Nyanza, and part of Eastern and Northeastern have been hosting the people who are victims of the floods as their homes. So I think priority must be given to those and those in the slums. There is 5.4 billion towards the rehabilitation of access roads and footbridges. So, Mr. Speaker, this 53.7 billion of the President's and his administration in addressing and developing a comprehensive stimulus package to take care of the vulnerable groups and the economy as a whole must be supported by this House. And I want to thank the Budget and Appropriation Committee because they made sure that outside the money allocated to the 4 big agenda, universal health care, manufacturing, they created some money for this stimulus. UHC pilots program, which has been tested in Kisumu, Nyeri, Machakos, and Isiolo, have further been allocated 50.2 billion, which now must help other counties in the line, the remaining, I think, 43 counties. But, Mr. Speaker, we must call upon the executive and government, and I'm sure Minister Kagwe is up to the task. He must deal with the governance issues at NHIF. Inadequate number of health workers must be addressed. The quality concerns in terms of stocks of drugs and other medical supplies at KEMSA must be addressed. And when all these challenges are addressed, Mr. Speaker, I am sure we shall succeed both as a Jubilee government in delivering our agenda to the people of Kenya, but each and every Kenyan will be part of the beneficiary. The manufacturing sector has been allocated 18.1 billion towards enabling it and being spearheaded by the private sector, while government only facilitates. So the private sector is the lead agency in making sure that we achieve the 15% manufacturing sector that we anticipated before COVID-19. Speaker, on food, Kenya is a net importer of food despite the abundance of resources we have in our country. To reverse that trend, this budget has committed to ensure that we have food secure by the end of the medium term. And it's against this backdrop that this budget and this report that government has allocated 52.1 billion towards enablers of food security. The Speaker, I really want to commend the National Treasury, the Judiciary, and the Parliamentary Service Commission for providing a detailed 2020-2021 program-based budget for the first time. And it's noted that some of the agencies have not complied fully with the tenets of a program-based budget, as highlighted by some of the departmental committees. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, if a country is to fully enjoy the benefits of a program-based budget, such increased efficiency of expenditure, as well as its effectiveness, ministries and departments and all the other agencies must always review their outputs and targets in their program-based budget. Speaker, I also hope that the departmental committees of this House will not just sit down. They must follow each and every penny that this House allocates, so that the accountability that the President Uhuru Kenyatta has spearheaded must be actualized in writing. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, as I said, we want to give each and every member an opportunity to contribute to this budget. So the whole of today until afternoon, we will deal with the budget, so that the minister can use the approved report to prepare his highlights on Thursday. And again, once that is done, maybe next week, we start the committee of supply. Once we finish, then we go and deal with the appropriation bill and the finance bill. That completes the whole circle of the budget-making process of Parliament. I beg to support.
A very solid contribution from the Leader of Majority. It's appreciated. We shall now have contribution from the Leader of Minority, the Honorable Mbadi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to make my contribution to the budget estimates of the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on budget estimates for 2020-2021 budgets. Mr. Speaker, let me start by first thanking and congratulating the Budget and Appropriations Committee, of which I'm also a member, for a job I consider well done. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying that a credible budget is that which is prepared through a process that is considered transparent, accountable, comprehensive, and faithful to the political direction. Mr. Speaker, it is through budget, or if I put it in simple terms, a credible budget is one where the government, through budgetary allocations of resources, try to actualize what it is saying, so that what it is saying is done to the citizenry. And Mr. Speaker, we are all aware that 2010 Constitution gave more powers, or conferred the power of the purse to this House, unlike previously when this House had limited powers in terms of budget-making process. In fact, the Parliament before 2010 was a rubber stamp Parliament. But right now, we have a Parliament that has power of the purse, a Parliament that discusses the estimates, makes changes or makes amendments in line with the priority objectives of the country, and after consulting extensively with the executive. And this power is enshrined under Article 221 of the Constitution, or if you like, you can read the whole chapter
12 of the Constitution on Public Finance. Mr. Speaker, this budget was prepared at a time that we consider very difficult, Mr. Speaker. When we were passing the budget policy statement in February, no one imagined that we would be discussing the estimates under the kind of environment we are in, where we are facing multiple challenges. I don't think there is any time in the history of this country that we have ever prepared a budget with the kind of challenges that we have today. We not only have the challenges of the pandemic, of this health crisis, we also have challenges of flooding, which has never been seen in over 50 years. And we also have other challenges like low-cost inversion and many, many others, Mr. Speaker. If you listen to Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, they talk of two things. One, Kenyans want food. Two, they need jobs. And it is through budget that a nation, that a country, that a government can provide food on the table for its citizens. It is through budget that you can help create employment opportunities for the people. Mr. Speaker, therefore, we expected this budget to provide food and jobs. In terms of giving more money to the agricultural sector, but what you see in this budget, Mr. Speaker, and I want to talk candidly, is that it is still largely business as usual. The same sectors that have been consuming the largest chunk of our budgetary allocations are still the same ones consuming, even at this moment of crisis. Mr. Speaker, jobs need to be protected for those who already have jobs. You see, before even the pandemic, Kenyans were facing high rates of unemployment. But now with the crisis, we are expecting more people to be unemployed. And therefore, it is the duty of the government to ensure that jobs are protected. So, Mr. Speaker, you remember when the budget estimates were tabled here. For the first time, the Budget and Appropriations Committee engaged with the Treasury from the word go. Because when the budget estimates were tabled, Mr. Speaker, we quickly picked the failure or the limitation of that budget in terms of addressing the current challenges. We realized that the budget was prepared in a business as usual manner, and we invited the Treasury and we discussed, and I'm happy that after that discussion, at least some funds have been specifically provided, targeted towards economic stimulus package. But still, this is not enough. Mr. Speaker, SMEs must still be protected further. I know there is some little money that is provided in the budget for the same, but we still need to do more. Mr. Speaker, something that we must also address, even at this stage in time, is, yes, you have provided money for VAT refunds and paying of pending bills. But we need to make sure that all pending bills are paid and mopped out at this time of crisis. We need to make sure that all VAT refunds are made. And Mr. Speaker, we need to provide more money to the pockets of Kenyans in terms of protecting jobs and even creating jobs. I know there is a provision of money here, some little amount for Kazi Mtaani, some little amount engaging people to provide labor in implementing some projects, but it is still not enough, Mr. Speaker. But again, in discussing with the Treasury, we are also alive to the fact that this pandemic is still ongoing and we don't know its final effect, and therefore you cannot predict with certainty how much economic stimulus package you may need. So going forward, it should not come as a surprise to this House that will be called upon to again realign budgetary resources towards more economic stimulative interventions. Mr. Speaker, there is my pet area that I've talked about for a very long time, but allow me, Mr. Speaker, again to repeat it, because I really don't know whether the Treasury listens. Mr. Speaker, the issue of public debt is now an emergency in this country. I think we need to be bold and candid and tell the executive that we need a day to have a national dialogue on public debt. Mr. Speaker, if you listen to the mover of the motion, and the seconder. This is what they are saying. And this is what the Budget Committee is saying. Out of the projected revenue collection of 1.62 trillion, that is 1,620 billion shillings, down from 1.64 trillion. Mr. Speaker, out of that amount, 904 billion is going to be used in debt repayment, debt servicing, out of which over 51% is just servicing interest, which means only 49% of that 904 billion is going towards paying the principal debt borrowed. Now, if you take that 904 billion from our projected revenue collection and add to it other recurrent expenditure, in fact, the total recurrent expenditure, including debt servicing, is 1.8 trillion. Is already more than the revenue projected, and I want to be cautious in projected revenue collection. It's not even revenue collected, projected. Of 1.6, you are paying 1.8 on recurrent. What does that tell you? That over 200 million is being borrowed to pay recurrent expenditure. That is the reality, and it is in blatant violation of our statutes, the Public Finance Management Act, and the Constitution. And Mr. Speaker, we cannot continue like this. A time has to come when we have to stop this. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, that 1.8 trillion still excludes the transfers to counties, Mr. Speaker, which a lot of it, we all know that a lot of money that we take to counties, the largest percentage goes again to recurrent expenditure, not development. If the whole of it was going to development expenditure, we'd be happy. So, Mr. Speaker, we have reached a point, Mr. Speaker, in this country where we are not able to service our debts as a country, and we must sit down and discuss it. Mr. Speaker, something that we need to talk about further, especially with COVID, the exports have reduced. Remittances, the diaspora remittances have gone down. What challenge does that pose to the economy? We are likely to suffer the foreign exchange reserve. It's likely to reduce. What has helped us is that the prices of oil has been down. If the prices of oil start rising, Mr. Speaker, we are in trouble. But the only help came from IMF. We are happy that IMF gave this country credit facility of 79 billion to help stabilize forex reserves. But for how long will we be relying on IMF? So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying in a nutshell is that we need, as a country, to talk about our balance of payment position, to talk about our debt level, to talk about our wage level, and to talk about our capability as a nation to finance our operations. Mr. Speaker, allow me to talk about some figures that are in the budget. Mr. Speaker, and this is in response to some story that was carried that CDF was supposed to be reduced and that we protected. There is nothing like we protected. The point is that CDF is provided in an act of parliament, through an act of parliament, which conditions this country to not give in the subsequent year less than what was given in the previous year. And therefore, what we did was just to engage with the Treasury and point out the law. But again, as I said, and I want to repeat it, budget is a negotiated document, Mr. Speaker, especially in a parliamentary system, in a presidential system. The executive has to negotiate with parliament. And, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what we did. And we made sure that CDF goes back to where it was. But that, as a parliament, we have also offered something. We reduced the budget of parliament for the first time, I think with over 2 billion shilling, 2.5 billion shilling. And this is over and above what we did at the supplementary budget stage. So I think it is a time of give and take, and as a nation, that is exactly what we have done. Mr. Speaker, as I talked about the transparency in the budget, Mr. Speaker, my final comment, because I can see my time is up. Mr. Speaker, I want to persuade the Treasury that going forward, I know they took advantage that this time we had a lot of challenges and it was unpredictable, certain things had to be adjusted here and there. But it is very untidy, Mr. Speaker, to see Treasury coming to us with budget estimates, and after 2 days, bring amendments. After 3 days again, they bring more amendments. Mr. Speaker, it causes a lot of confusion, not only to the committee, but to the entire country, because we therefore do not know the policy direction of the country. I know on Thursday, we are waiting for policy highlights and budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures. We would want to hear how the government wants to go further in terms of financing this budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
The Honorable Mbadi, I've heard you speak to the issue of SMEs, a provision being made for SMEs. I've looked at this, and the proposal is to provide only 3 billion for SMEs. And you remember in this House, we were all whipped into removing the red caps because the government was so caring about SMEs. And now we have provided only 3 billion to support this alleged backbone of this economy. We shall have contribution from the Honorable Ole Metito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have 5 minutes. I don't really know how much I will say, because I will speak on behalf of the Committee on Defense and Foreign Relations that oversights about 5 state agencies. Let me start with our forces, defense forces, and say, Mr. Speaker, our Kenya Defense Forces have really managed to keep at bay the threats from Al-Shabaab very significantly, and I think they require an applause, they require commendation, and also resources to match the emerging threats because of the environment that is always changing, Mr. Speaker. Our defense forces as well, Mr. Speaker, are very critical in our fight against this pandemic, the COVID-19, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, resources need to be provided to ensure that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on our national intelligence services, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that they have also played a very critical role on COVID-19 containment. The agency will use part of the resources, Mr. Speaker, in giving support to the Ministry of Health in contact tracing and surveillance. And as they do that, Mr. Speaker, if we don't flatten the curve on this pandemic, Mr. Speaker, therefore there will be need for more resources to be provided to our national intelligence services so that they can help in flattening the curve, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the foreign affairs is a very critical component in terms of our diplomatic front. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have actually embarked on a very offensive and in the opening of our missions, like we have done in ECOWAS region, Accra, Senegal, Djibouti as well, and also Morocco, Mr. Speaker. But we have seen a reduction of 7% in personal emolument and O&M of 21%, respectively, reduction, Mr. Speaker, in our supplementary estimate too. And therefore, we are opening new missions, but we are not providing resources to match that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, still on foreign issue, Mr. Speaker, the foreign affairs have really impacted on economic diplomacy. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we have seen as a committee that there is need for commercial attaches to be seconded to these missions, Mr. Speaker, where we think we will benefit economically as a country from these missions, Mr. Speaker. We have also acquired a lot of, or some assets as a ministry, foreign affairs, especially in Lusaka, Kinshasa, New York, Washington, among others. But
the Honorable Metito, just hold on a second. I would like to advise you that you are speaking as chair of a committee. You therefore have 10 minutes. Chairs have 10 minutes.
Very
if
good.
You look
Thank
at
you.
the resolutions of the House. Chairs have 10 minutes. The other members have 5 minutes. So you have 10 minutes.
Very good, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, now I'm relaxed. Let me actually emphasize my points on what I was saying about as a continuation on our missions abroad. Mr. Speaker, we have acquired some assets abroad in our missions, especially in Lusaka, New York, Washington, Kinshasa. But Mr. Speaker, despite these efforts, there is need to renovate these assets, always to maintain them, to put them in the required standards. Otherwise, they are going to deteriorate and sometimes become very expensive in the long run through major rehabilitation works. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, there is need for Treasury to provide some budget lines for maintenance of these assets, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said, there is a lot of capital flows, increasing capital flows to Kenya through these missions, and some of these remittances the leader of minority was talking about. And these are new sources for our economic diplomacy pillars. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we need to be competitive globally as a nation, and these missions are going to play a critical role in ensuring that, Mr. Speaker. We have visited so many missions like Pretoria, Washington, Dubai, Lusaka, Los Angeles, Malaysia, among us, Mr. Speaker, and we recommend as a committee that the agency responsible for international trade to liaison with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and second, or send commercial attaches to some of these missions, Mr. Speaker, to enable the Ministry of Foreign Affairs achieve that role of economic diplomacy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the East African Community and Regional Development Ministry, which we oversight as a committee, for regional development, I want to say there is too little which was provided to these 6 RDS, and therefore, first of all, we recommend that the ministry fast-tracked forwarding to this House through my committee, Mr. Speaker, the Regional Development Authority bill that will put these RDS, all of them under one umbrella, instead of each one of them operating under an individual act of parliament, Mr. Speaker, and therefore this may actually help them in sourcing for funds. On the East African integration front, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that as one of the states under the East Africa community, we are at the Anga nation, Mr. Speaker. We are actually taking the summit this year. If it is not the COVID-19 pandemic, we should have been actually chairing the summit by now. But, Mr. Speaker, we have not provided enough resources to equal that, Mr. Speaker. And again, on that, the issue of EALA, the East African Legislative Assembly, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to provide more resources as a country to enable
The Honorable Katito, just let me remind the Honorable Kabinga, the member from where, who has just walked into the House, that the rules of the House still apply. You have walked through that door, you did not bow to the House, you walked to the minority side, you crossed the floor to the majority side. Just remind yourself of the rules. We have not abandoned the rules, the Honorable Kabinga. Proceed, the Honorable Betito.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I hope my time is controlled. Mr. Speaker, I was saying, EALA, the East Africa Legislative Assembly, members of that assembly, Mr. Speaker, I think they need to be facilitated to the level required for them to be able to represent this country adequately. Mr. Speaker, my last point is on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, there was a stimulus package of 5 billion, which was provided to counties, Mr. Speaker. But my concern has been actually taken by the way that money was shared. The Commission for Revenue, and I would like the attention of the House to hear this, the Commission for Revenue Allocation, Mr. Speaker, have used the normal basis or the normal index on the provision or the allocation of monies to counties, Mr. Speaker. But this is an emergency fund, the 5 billion. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it should have focused on the threat these counties are facing. I'm aware that as per yesterday, 38 counties have registered cases of COVID-19, Mr. Speaker. Only 9 are remaining, which is our prayers that they will not get any. But, Mr. Speaker, the Commission on Revenue Allocation should have divided this money, the 5 billion, which is an economic stimulus for that purpose, Mr. Speaker, based on the threat these counties are facing, Mr. Speaker. If you look at counties that are on the border, like let's say from Isabania to Lungalunga, talk of Kajiado, talk of Taita Taveta, Kwale, Migori, Mandera on the other side, and among others, Mr. Speaker, I call upon the Commission on Revenue Allocation and also to the Senate, Mr. Speaker, to review the formula they use to subdivide or to allocate this money to counties and to focus, because this is not the normal revenue allocation to counties, Mr. Speaker. This is an economic stimulus for this emergency, this pandemic, and review the formula used, Mr. Speaker, and focus on the threat the counties are facing, Mr. Speaker, because if you look at the cases being announced on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker, counties at the border, the ones I have mentioned, Mr. Speaker, should have given more resources, Mr. Speaker, because they're the ones reporting more cases because of the situation being at the border, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, CRA, Commission for Revenue Allocation, together with the Senate and this House, Mr. Speaker, should really review that formula and let the formula for sharing this, because it is a one-off or a short-time issue, Mr. Speaker, be based on the threat those counties are facing as far as this pandemic is concerned. When it comes to the normal revenue allocation, which is provided in this estimate, Mr. Speaker, then the normal allocation formula should apply. I beg to support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much.
Honorable members, the next opportunity goes to the Honorable Koinange, Chair of Committee on National Security. The Honorable Otiende, what is out of order?
Mr. Speaker, I'm constrained to raise this point of order, and I raised it last year around this time. And I raised it under Standing Order 1 for your direction. Last year, I raised it, and the substantive speaker gave some directions. Mr. Speaker, I want to confirm to you that this morning, the first member to enter this House was the Honorable Ole Sankok, and I was the second. Mr. Speaker, this session started at 10 and it will end at 1. Mr. Speaker, if we go as per the direction, you realize that 15 committees appeared. If 15 chairs speak, that's 150 minutes. If you add the mover and the second has 20 minutes, plus the leader of majority and leader of minority, it comes to 190 minutes. Mr. Speaker, what it means is that all those who prepared this report and all those who participated, because all the chairs participate, are the only people who will speak between 10 and 1. Mr. Speaker, we know that given the sitting arrangements, if you sit in the morning, you cannot sit in the afternoon. It means that all of us who are here will only be listening to those who prepared the report, praising the report. Mr. Speaker, that cannot be the intention of budget making. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge you that you find a modality of allowing other members to speak to this report. Otherwise, we are all reduced to spectators. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Tiende, I can see that your sentiments are receiving a lot of favor from the general plenary. But the Honorable Tiende, you'll also appreciate that the hands of this particular speaker are tied, because this House operates on the resolutions of the members of this House. I will therefore draw your attention to the resolutions that this House made on the 18th of February 2020 in regard to this particular matter that is before the House, and that is in regard to the general supply debate. And it provides that a maximum of 3 sitting days with 30 minutes for the mover, 15 minutes in replying, maximum of 10 minutes for chairpersons of departmental committees, and maximum of 5 minutes for any member. And priority shall be given to the leader of majority party and minority party, who shall be limited to those minutes, and the priority in speaking be accorded to the majority party, the leader of minority party, and the respective chairpersons of departmental committees in the order that they appear in the second schedule to the standing orders. So the hands of this Speaker are tied. And this is the resolution of the House. And it's only this House that can revise its resolutions. So I will be obedient to the House, the Honorable Tiende, as much as your sentiments find favor in my personal estimation of them. But the resolutions of the House are superior to my own sentiments. So therefore, I will follow the resolutions of the House. The Honorable, the Speaker cannot be out of order. The Honorable Koinange, proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yeah, Honorable Speaker, I wanted my brother, Dr. Otiende, to know that chairs are usually very sensitive, so I'll take the most shortest time to give my report for my committee. Honorable Speaker, the estimate have come at a time our security environment is faced with a lot of challenges occasioned by the ongoing global pandemic, COVID-19, and the rising number of crime in our country being reported by the police. The total number of crimes reported in 2019, for instance, increased by 5.8%, that is 93,411 from 88,268 in 2018. We must work hard to reverse this trend, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I'm happy to note that significant resources have been proposed in this budget towards reversing this trend. The State Department for Interior will continue focusing on scaling up investments towards modernization of security system aimed at strengthening security of our borders and throughout the country, enhance security operation, especially areas prone to crime, as well as enforcing COVID-19 restrictions. Honorable Speaker, specifically, the thematic areas for improving our security will focus on, 1, expansion of the national surveillance control system in major towns with an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.5 billion towards a communication and surveillance system. Honorable Speaker, the system initially was to cover Mombasa to Nairobi, but in the next phase, we'll cover all the other areas as far as Lamu, as far as Kajiado, and all the other areas of the country. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, police mobility through the leasing program with an allocation of 10.7 billion, my committee noted that the program have been transferred back to the National Treasury to enhance efficiency. We support this, Honorable Speaker, any policy measure aimed at improving service delivery to wananchi. And thirdly, modernization of the police service with a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 1 billion. Honorable Speaker, modernization holds the key to turning our police service into an efficient and effective service with up-to-date tools and technology towards combating emerging forms of crime, such as cybercrime, terrorism, drug trafficking, among others. My committee, however, noted with concern the dwindling allocation towards the program. Further, the shortfall in resource allocation for police modernization program was a risk to the overall implementation of the policies and programs of the government. Without modern equipment, Honorable Speaker, such as the use of drones in operation areas, the war on terror may not be won. The evolving acts of terrorism may hinder economic development through direct costs, such as loss of labor and capital. We implore upon the National Treasury to enhance resources towards the same as soon as normalcy returns. Number 4, Honorable Speaker, equipping of the forensic laboratory with the proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 335 million. Honorable Speaker, the equipping of the forensic laboratory will enable our criminal justice system to resolve cases very urgently and may not be resolved without these signs, Honorable Speaker. The delay in the completion of this project, therefore, has led to delayed returns in investment. I call upon National Treasury and the State Department of Interior to prioritize the completion of this critical project. And fifthly, Honorable Speaker, to sustain police welfare, I am happy to note that this budget has catered for medical and group personal insurance for the police service and the prisons, with a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 3.4 billion and 2.3 billion respectively. And Honorable Speaker, national security is an enabler towards achievement of our priorities as identified in the Vision 2030 and the medium-term plan alongside the economic information agenda of the Jubilee administration. Additionally, the sector is critical towards the attainment of the Big Four. Under the universal health care of the Big Four, the proposed allocation will ensure universal NIH cover through public mobilization of NHIF coverage and bear office. Both police and prison officers are under NHIF and enhance the issuance of ID cards and birth certificates to enable admission into the NHIF scheme. Honorable Speaker, on food and nutrition, the same Department for Interior will sensitize the public barazas on importance of water harvesting and planting of drought-resistant crops and provide security to all water infrastructure towers. Honorable Speaker, to support manufacturing with the proposed allocation, the sector will install CCTV cameras in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Eldoret, and Nakuru to enhance security and enable the implementation of 24-hour economy. Honorable Speaker, my committee made the following reallocations which were critical but were not funded. One, drug menacing in killing our youth, particularly in the coastal region. It is on this basis His Excellency the President directed that the Miritini National Youth Service Center be opened to rehabilitate the youth affected by drug and substance abuse, particularly during this time of COVID-19, where our jobless youth may highly be tempted to engage in drug abuse. My committee recommended Kenya shillings 100 million be set aside to go towards operationalization of the Miritini Center to assist the youth to overcome addiction, improve their lives, and to become productive members of the society. We hope to open more such centers in every region of this country as our economic situation improves. Honorable Speaker, the BPS 2020 promised enhanced allocation to fight corruption. Such resources were to be utilized to ensure that all corruption suspects are brought to book and in record time. In acknowledgement that the Director of Criminal Investigation has been in the forefront in fighting corruption, however, the proposed resources toward the Directorate were far much below their requirements. It is again this backdrop, Honorable Speaker, that my committee recommended additional allocation of 200 million to enhance their operations. Honorable Speaker, we applaud the program by the Public Service Commission on recruitment of interns, which was introduced in the year 2019-20. This program is critical towards equipping our youth with skills necessary for them to contribute towards the economic development of our country. The program will further allow succession management, which currently bedevils our public service. The interns, upon going through the program, will then be absorbed in the public service to address the gaps caused by natural attrition. We noted, however, that the program is underfunded. Honorable Speaker, Service delivery to wananchi is being hampered by delay in operationalization of new sub-county headquarters. We noted all this. We need more money injected to operationalize the sub-county. And I see my time is almost through, Honorable Speaker. Our committee also noted with concern that the State Department for Interior still holds the human resource functions of the National Police Service Commission, the personal armament budget, which goes hand in hand, and this should be taken back to the National Police Service for ease of dealing with the issues of police.
Rowan, I see no other departmental chair here. I'll therefore give this opportunity to the Honorable Tiende Amolo, who is first to my left here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We thank God for small graces of most chairs absconding Parliament. Mr. Speaker, this is an important occasion for Parliament, for it is the budget-making discretion which inheres in the National Assembly. The beauty of a democracy is that the organs of government are each given a specific jurisdiction. The executive holds the sword, Parliament holds the purse, the judiciary holds the gavel or the judicial hammer, while independent officers hold the spotlight for the people to see what everyone else is doing. When we do this, we do it on behalf of the people. It is important that each of these organs respect the Constitution. It is as important as it is for the executive not to overreach in respect of the judiciary, as it is for the judiciary not to overreach in respect of this House. The tendency sometimes of some judges overreaching and trying to fetter the budget-making discretion of this House, trying to fetter the law-making discretion where it is not unconstitutional, or trying to tie the hands of Parliament when exercising its oversight role is one to be condemned. And Mr. Speaker, I am glad that we have come to that circle when everyone now accepts that the budget-making role is a role for the National Assembly. But there's more to be done. I thank the committee for doing a number of things. One, in these COVID times, for being innovative with public participation. I thank the committee, too, for respecting what for long had not been realized, for respecting the requirement that the budget for the judiciary and Parliament must be considered independently and alongside the one proposal from the National Treasury, which they did. I have looked at that here. But we need to go further. Because, Mr. Speaker, when we make the budget and approve the estimates, it means no one has the authority to spend money which is not approved by this House. A practice has emerged and has been in place for the last 7 years, where beyond the estimates approved, the executive goes ahead and spends money, only later to come assuming we will rubber stamp what was already spent, abusing the small leeway left by Article 223. Article 223 is very clear. It leaves a very small leeway where money can be spent before approval where it's absolutely necessary. It is not a routine occurrence, and that I urge that we must sanction where it is appropriate. Mr. Speaker, I think that it is also important what the committee has said and what some members have spoken to, and that is the question of pending bills. I think pending bills should be paid. But I think sometimes we might be in danger of overemphasizing this. As we urge payment of pending bills, let us urge the ascertainment of the legitimacy of those bills. We cannot say that a public officer must pay pending bills at the peril of going to jail, without adding that that public officer must ascertain the legitimacy of that bill and to confirm that is due and owing. We are in a country that is full of corruption. There are many bills which are pending, but which are not due and payable. So I urge that as we urge payment of pending bills, let us urge legitimacy. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I want an assurance on two quick things. One, the leader of majorities raised an issue here some time back, and I respect all the members of the committee. But he alleged, and he did not withdraw, that the members of the committee sometimes fix projects for themselves. I want an assurance from the mover of the motion that that is not the case here. I also want an assurance, as I finish, Mr. Speaker, that as we look at the effects of the floods and allocate money to floods, let us remember that there are also others who have been affected by the rising waters of Lake Victoria, by the rising waters of Lake Naivasha and other lakes, and they are equally affected. I urge that there be a liberal interpretation of the effect of floods so that some of our people, like in Rarieda, can be covered. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Very good contribution, the Honorable Tiende. It is to be noted that if the paying master pays a bill that is disputed, that is illegal, is irregular, then he is also liable for prosecution. So that is to be noted. The Honorable Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I do, from the onset, support this particular motion from the Budget and Appropriation Committee. Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Makali Mundu, what is out of order?
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I just wanted to raise this point before my colleague starts organizing his points. Honorable Speaker, you realize that the sitting, because of the problems we have, there are some who are out in the tents, and actually have been in the tent since morning, and I registered to be given an opportunity to contribute. Would I be in order to plead with you, Mr. Speaker, that even as you consider those who are in now that have come in, also those who are out there are given a chance also to, because it has been the tradition of the House.
The Honorable Makali, that is, it is true. In fact, I have a list here, and we are number one on the list of the people outside who are going to speak. It is good that we are also now inside here. The Honorable Sankok, proceed. We will consider them, the Honorable Makali. Thank you for holding their brief.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And as you consider them, also consider my time, which have been eaten by Honorable Makali. Honorable Speaker, as Omolo Otiende had put it, that as we pay the pending bills, let us ascertain which bills are payable. And it will not take long for a county government or ministries, department, and agency of the national government to ascertain which one is payable and which one is not payable. If there are those that are not payable, let them be listed. But those which are payable, the pending bills should be cleared. Honorable Speaker, I do support this particular budget, Honorable Speaker, because it has come at a time when we are faced with a very precarious situation in which we have COVID-19. And Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the Budget Committee members for making sure that they have brought into play the issue of COVID-19, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, but we also need to itemize the COVID-19 fund so that the executive does not get the leeway of using the COVID-19 fund the way they want, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there are vulnerable members who have been affected by COVID-19 more than others, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we know the manual workers, Honorable Speaker. We know those who work in the hotel industry, Honorable Speaker, but more so to persons with disability. Honorable Speaker, because for a long time, persons with disability have been depending on donation. Now the whole world is locked down, Honorable Speaker. It's very difficult for us to get donors from outside. Honorable Speaker, persons with disability have also been benefiting from religious organizations, churches and mosques, Honorable Speaker. They are now currently closed, Honorable Speaker. The vulnerable members of our society who are persons with disability, Honorable Speaker, are suffering the most, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, I suggest that as we itemize this particular budget, Honorable Speaker, let us have 10% of the COVID-19 fund be set aside to cushion persons with disability, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, schools are closed. So the education sector does not need the normal allocation, Honorable Speaker. We should channel that money, Honorable Speaker, to cushion Kenyans, probably by investing them in the agriculture sector. Because, Honorable Speaker, majority of our citizens who have been in the cities have not been able to maintain house rent and the bills that are in cities, so they have gone back to our rural areas, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, if we can transfer funds from Education Ministry to Agriculture Ministry, Honorable Speaker, so that we can have a stimulus of agriculture in our rural areas, Honorable Speaker, so that it will be a solace to the farmers, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there is also, Honorable Speaker, pension income of our senior citizen, Honorable Speaker. I hear, Honorable Speaker, that it is now being taxed, Honorable Speaker. This committee should actually be able to check so that we don't again tax pension earned by the senior citizen of our country, whom we are cushioning through cash transfer, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I was particularly touched by the speech of the chairman of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, that is Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah. He was like giving a speech of somebody who is exiting. And I count it as a retirement of a king, Honorable Speaker, because, Honorable Speaker, we have interacted with Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, and have been the best chairman, Honorable Speaker, in this particular House, Honorable Speaker, especially when it comes to access to government procurement opportunities for persons with disability. I've been interacting with him, Honorable Speaker. But there is a lot of balancing between party loyalty and your own decision, Honorable Speaker, and I think that is the background in which Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah was giving his speech of exit. Honorable Speaker, we wish him all the best, but he was a dedicated and intellect chairman, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, with those very many remarks, I do support this.
The Honorable Sankok, it's true the Honorable Ichung'wah has done a commendable job, and we wish him, we hope, and we know he's still in that position until the powers that be that decide who becomes what in those positions decides. But as far as we are concerned here, he has done a good job, and we still have him. The Honorable Mboko Milemba, member for Muhaya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to support this budget and also make my comments. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee led by Ichung'wah, and like it has just been indicated by the previous speaker, that he has done a good job, and I think he'll remain one of the most respected guys as the chairman of that particular committee in the House. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank that committee because it was able to highlight most of the important things, including trying to have changed the mindset of the Treasury from creating a normal budget to that is extraordinary in terms of covering the issues that were concerned in the COVID-19 attack in the country and worldwide. And on that particular level, they did advise, and the budget and Treasury included the issue of economic stimulus in the budget. And this economic stimulus was good, as we know in all recessions, at a time when we have a recession economically worldwide, and history proves that economic stimuluses are good in order to support the economy to grow again, especially post-COVID. And I want to urge that when the minister will be considering his proposal to the House, he should include further and even consider the issue of the economic stimulus in areas where it touches on the constituencies and other areas that are devolved to devolve that particular stimulus. For instance, I'm happy about Kazi kwa Vijana, which is ongoing in some of the areas, but this needs to be devolved in all other areas, and I'm sorry, and I was also disturbed that even the good statement that originally was in the budget report here on devolving this particular fund to go to the NGCDF was later on repulsed, and the chairman spoke on it. But this would be very good so that Kazi kwa Vijana and other economic stimuluses that have been given by the government can go down into the constituencies and even to the local level of administration. Imagining a Muhaya, I'm imagining all other constituencies having that plan ongoing. Honorable Speaker, because of time limits, I would also want to indicate that one other thing that this report talked about was the issue of foreign debt. And it brought it out very well, dealing first with our ability to earn from foreign exchange, which is based on agriculture and especially the floriculture. And it went ahead to indicate that that area has been hit and we shall lose over 60 billion Kenya shillings because the exports are not ongoing properly because of the COVID. And this will certainly affect our ability then to pay the foreign debt. And the report further indicated the dangers that we have with the foreign debt, that it has risen to over 904 billion Kenya shillings, which is almost 1 trillion Kenya shillings. And further, it went ahead to indicate that this debt, currently servicing it, and the cost of servicing the debt is higher than even the development budget or the capital budget that we have in the country. And therefore, this then informs the House that we as Parliament must talk and walk the talk that we have. Because recently, and not long time ago, there was a bill in the House to increase the gap of borrowing. And we ourselves increased the gap that within which we can borrow. We changed it to 9 trillion. Today, I saw the leader of minority speak emotionally, and I love him, though he's not in the House, because he's a true economist. And he spoke, I think, with his first voice of a real person who wants to actually oversight the government. So we as a House must stand and actually tell the executive to stop borrowing, and not speak about stopping borrowing, explain exactly how it's dangerous, but later on, negate that and forget. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, as I see my time is over, I want to assert that the budget of education should not be reduced. Most of that budget is actually going to salaries and other recurrent expenditure. And we should not look at it as a budget which you can actually take and now take to another place because of the COVID. I want to rebut what the earlier speaker said, that that's a budget which we can actually lay our hands on. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance.
The Honorable Thuku Kwenya. The Honorable Thuku Kwenya.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to speak on the report by Budget and Appropriation Committee. And from the onset, I wish to congratulate them for a job well done in going through the estimates presented by the Treasury. And in the same breath, Mr. Speaker, I've noted a few concerns that I would want to raise. The issue of pending bills is brought about by Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, the chair. And there are questions that beg, how is it that we end up having pending bills when we have laws that are supposed to safeguard us from getting ourselves into such? Because if, for sure, the officers, the accounting officers who are in charge are able to follow PFMA 2012 and PPDA, that is Public Procurement and Disposal Act of 2015, then we cannot and we should not be having issues to do with pending bills, as the ministries and the departments and, of course, parastatals that are under the government of Kenya would be spending money within the budget and the money that has been allocated therein. I've also noted that, you know, His Excellency the President has been talking of universal electrification, whereby now I happen to just go through the allocation for the Ministry of Energy, and I can't see any increase in the allocation in that ministry, so that then we can achieve and actualize universal electrification in terms of rural electrification, maximization and stuff. And for sure, our people are going through a lot of problems in the rural areas where there's no electricity, because we find that kids or students and pupils in urban setup are able to access classes through virtual learning, which cannot happen in rural areas because there's no electricity. And in the spirit of equity, we would want to see a situation whereby the rural kids and the rural learners are where they should be exposed to learning, just to give them a platform to compete with the rest that are in the urban setup, by making sure that we allocate enough money for rural electrification. In fact, it's a big problem, especially in Nyandarua County, whereby electricity access is at less than 35%. And this is something that is really worrying. And going forward, maybe something needs to be done. The other issue that I noted is the fiscal gap that is increasing. You see, we envisage a situation whereby we're going to have about 7.5% fiscal gap. That is to say that our collection is expected to go down. Our revenue collection is expected to go down. And of course, we appreciate the fact that there are issues with COVID, and that has caused our government to not to collect revenue as envisaged. And of course, the issue of reduction in terms of taxes, VAT from 16 to 14%, that is going to really cause shortage in terms of revenue collection. But then, there's a problem that I foresee, whereby if our budget is about 1.8 trillion, and our collection is about 1.6 trillion, then we'll have a gap of about 200 billion that the government must look for ways to mitigate and make sure that we have that money. Because of course, having it in budget means then that it is expected to be spent. And what I foresee is a situation whereby we are going to be in a lot of inflation, because the government must resort maybe to some extent to local borrowing. And once we do domestic borrowing, you should expect that inflation should go up. And as the leader of minorities said, we need to live within our means and to budget within our means, so that then we do not spiral, get ourselves deeper in financial problems in the future. Mr. Speaker, I also noted the issue of public participation, whereby there is a whole 1.2 billion allocated to constituencies that are within the counties that were visited, the 12 constituencies. And I would hate to imagine that there was an allocation of pork barrel, whereby there are beneficiaries from budget committee, whereby you find one single constituency allocated a whole 60 million. I'm saying this with authority because I've gone through the report. And I think this is something that we need to look at in the future, so that then we do not have some constituencies benefiting more within the same constituency. And Mr. Speaker, I am saying this because in the past, when I joined this parliament, we had an allocation whereby my constituency, which is Kinangop, was allocated lesser money, and so much money going to one single constituency in terms of the money that was meant for Ministry of Education. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as I support, I think that we need to look into some areas so that then we can see some level of fairness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I had more time, I would have contributed more on the issue of Big Four, on the issue of manufacturing. But in the interest of time, I beg to support the report. Thank you, Mr.
Honorable Tuku Kwenya, you have spoken well, and it is true that these public hearings under Article 221 by the Budget Committee must be done in a very transparent way, so that we must have a list of all those counties that have been visited and the projects that have been undertaken in those counties and where. Because I can see in this report they are saying that Vihiga is salivating. We have not been visited since this started. And the people there are hungry also for projects. So it is correct that we should do this as fairly and openly as possible. We shall have contribution from the Honorable Maanzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important matter. Mr. Speaker, I'm in the Committee of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, and I'm sure at some point my able chair, the Honorable Kanini Kega, will be able to lay a basis. But while this motion was being moved, it was clear that due to the COVID challenge, one of the most important things is, and this is happening all over the world, is how we are going to jumpstart the economy post-COVID. And from the reports we are getting from World Health Organization and the Ministry of Health, it is clear that unless we do a few things in a certain manner, Mr. Speaker, then COVID could be with us for quite some years, Mr. Speaker, and the earliest a vaccine could be found is after about a year or so. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have to plan early on how we are going to cushion the economy, what institutions should be supported. Under the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, it's clear, Mr. Speaker, that we have departments which could be used to jumpstart the economy. For example, Kirudi, which does incubation of small businesses likely to pay taxes and therefore contribute to the exchequer. And also, we have Kenya Industrial Estates as an institution also, which promotes businesses, Mr. Speaker. But when you look at these allocations that have been done, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that some of these very important institutions, among others, we have quite a number of them under that department, do not have sufficient funds. And therefore, when we come to supplementary, Mr. Speaker, it will be very important so that we plan in jumpstarting the economy eventually, because the economy has really suffered. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to public participation, the committee has visited Makueni County and identified a very, very important project where we do, fruit processing, an area called Kalamba, and there's a big proposed road there which has been hanging on since independence for tarmacking, called Ukia Emali Road. And that particular road, when the committee visited, was able to get from the residents that this road is so important that it must begin. But Mr. Speaker, I also am aware that the government is very desirous to complete ongoing projects before beginning new ones. And this one having been completed, and Mr. Speaker, the planning of the road and the design of the road having been executed for some time now, Mr. Speaker, it is clear this particular road then should be funded in one way or another. We have engaged the executive, Mr. Speaker, on this matter severally. We have engaged Treasury severally, and they are in a way trying to find some funds, at least even to begin, Mr. Speaker, because of the importance of the economy there. Everybody's looking for fruits now. Everybody's looking for oranges. This is where to find them, but you don't have a road really where heavy trucks can be able to transport this very, very important commodity, especially in these days of COVID, Mr. Speaker. So I'm still pleading with the committee, pleading with the executive, pleading with the Treasury to find it in their goodness, because these are just 42 kilometers, which will make a huge, huge difference, Mr. Speaker, in this matter. And also on the matter of education, Mr. Speaker, quite a number of monies have been allocated to schools. Again, due to COVID, students may stay home for a year. And what the government can do now, because once the students open, there will definitely be social distancing in schools, is to invest now through CDF for construction of classrooms and the renovation of the schools, and again also through Ministry of Education, wherever they can supply. I've heard of 300 schools. At least each constituency should have a school allocated, to be renovated or to be considered heavily, because we have 290 constituencies. And maybe the balance of 10, we could check where there is a heavy density, maybe in the cities or a place which has been hit hard like Mombasa or Nairobi, or where really there's a need. And finally, the schools be used as isolation centers, whether institutions, whether KMTC. Then there should be a budget also to make sure there's proper fumigation before students go back to those institutions. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity.
The Honorable Kimunya, member for Kipipiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. There isn't much time, so I'll go straight into the matter. I want to start by thanking the committee for really preparing these estimates and the reports and everything and going through them within very difficult circumstances. It's not the same environment that we usually meet and do everything in relaxation. So we need to recognize that they actually went out of their way and risked, the social distancing and limitations to do it. I also want to recognize, obviously, that we are planning under what generally you refer to as VUCA conditions. Mr. Speaker, for your added vocabulary today, VUCA talks of very volatile situations, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This is the kind of situation that is underpinning our budget for this year. And however you look at it, these estimates can only be best estimates based on the current reality. Nobody knows how COVID will pan out. Nobody knows when it will end. Nobody knows when certainty will return on the economy. And hence, even as we are sitting here today, and I hear comments about, yes, we should not bring another supplementary too soon, we need to be alive to the fact that there's nobody who can tell where we are, especially given the challenges we are having. And it's against this background, Mr. Speaker, that I would want the Cabinet Secretary, when he comes on Thursday, to perhaps consider two issues that I want to raise. The report raises in passing the possibility of generating some revenues through divestiture. It's like a one line within the report, but there's a much meat to it. Yet to me, it's a very fundamental thing that we could look at, given all the discussion we are having on our exposure to debt. We are already overexposed. We can't borrow more from the economy. We don't know how much revenue we're going to generate. And it's something that the CS needs to consider. How much can we raise by the government selling part of its stake, for example, in Safaricom? We own 25% of a multi-trillion company. If the government could just cede 10% of that within the next 1 year, plus a few other Kenya pipeline and all those others, we could generate close to 300 billion that could go towards reduction of the debt exposure that we're having and to mitigate some of these expenses. So it's something that I just want to flag for the Cabinet Secretary to consider, so that as he comes here on Thursday, he might want to tell us much more what he wants to do in that direction. The other item I just want to flag is, yes, we have some money that has been pushed for expansion of education infrastructure, and I hear members saying, yeah, we should remove some money for education to put to agriculture. But our children, we have 15 million children waiting to go back to school. The schools, the teachers are still being paid, yeah, with or without the school. So the expenditure is not like being saved because the children are not in school. By the time we go back to schools, you need social distancing. Currently, our pupils sit 3 per desk. Yeah? They will need now to sit 1 per desk. So you need like 3 times the number of desks that are currently within the schools. So we need much more investment in education if our children have to go back to school and observe the social distancing norms that are critical for the prevention of COVID in those schools. So, Mr. Speaker, then allow me to appeal to the members that in addition to the money that has been set aside through the stimulus for educational purposes, if members could commit more resources through their CDF to expand the education facilities, an extra classroom, extra desks, yeah, then the government can provide the extra teachers, and we will not just be preparing for mitigating against COVID, but also in preparation for the competence-based curriculum rollout. So let us work on it together, knowing that, yes, we may not have all resources as a nation, but each one of us could help through our CDF, the National Treasury, plus then the extra teachers that will be there. Mr. Speaker, I think I don't want to get beyond that, but if the Cabinet Secretary perhaps could consider what we are basically talking of on divestiture as a source of extra revenue. The last time it took place was when I was the Treasurer in 2008. Since that time, no single parastatal has actually been divested from. And I don't know why, but we are sitting on so much resources out there that could be harnessed to come in and help our debt exposures and raising more money to intervene on the current issues. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to support.
The Honorable Kaluma. Yes.
Yes, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a problem. Speaker, I've been here since morning listening to my colleagues lamenting about what ought to have been there and what the Cabinet Secretary, when he addresses this House, as a mere formality, Mr. Speaker, should add to the budget items. Mr. Speaker, there is a good reason as to why the people of Kenya said in Article 95 and 96 that the budgeting authority of the nation is in Parliament. And I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, penned, that this is, I think, the 8th year with that constitutional provision. This Parliament, including the Senate, are not meaningfully engaging in the budgeting process. As Speaker, we must sit as Parliament, even after this budget, and see how we can remove those restrictions in laws which have taken away the power given to Parliament by the Constitution of a budget. As Speaker, in that law, and I'm happy in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, we have formed a subcommittee, which I'm heading, to see these laws we can unlock so that the meaning that the people of Kenya had in Article 95 in saying that we budget, is really meaningful. Mr. Speaker, there is a good reason for it. We are the representatives of the people coming across the nation. We are the ones who know the needs of those areas. It is those needs we should be bringing to the table so that when we are at this stage, we are speaking to things which are actually going to help down there. Now, Speaker, if we come to those legal reforms, and I would urge the House that we take them up so that we avoid these lamentations, which are like biblical, we will have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where we can therefore also rationalize the relationship between departmental committees and the Committee on Budget. I had the chair in charge of the committee in which I serve, Administration National Security. This is the committee under whose charge those sectors are. We understand better where accountability issues are. We understand better how the nation can be moved by right fundings to various sectors. But Mr. Speaker, we do a report and it is all thrown out. Just the other day we passed the law on small claims courts, requiring that we now have small claims courts across the country. But Mr. Speaker, what is the budget of the judiciary for the construction of the courts? The courts are stuck. The courts we started building in 2013. You go to Homa Bay, you go to Nairobi, you go to Northeastern, they are all not being built. And yet, a law was rushed here, Mr. Speaker, saying we are going to have adjudicators across. Are they going to work under trees or where are they going to work? And that cannot work in the current legal arrangements undermining the constitutional provision. Because the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee will come and sit and say, we want these courts to be built. It ends there. Mr. Speaker, as we combat COVID, we are being told each time, Mr. Speaker, that you wash your hands using running water. I thought, therefore, that the budget for this year would have a very big allocation for the water ministry. I was thinking of a budget line which was going to ensure that there is at least a borehole in every learning institution around as we wait to open schools in September. But Mr. Speaker, across the country we have areas where you are talking of running water, but they don't even have standing water. If I may call it still, standing water. You go to Homa Bay Town constituency, a bay means land abutting a water body. We are halfway into the lake, Mr. Speaker, but you see water with your eyes. You have no water even to wash your hands across there. Now, we have therefore a budget, Mr. Speaker, which has not been contextualized to the prevailing circumstances because we've allowed our powers by law made in Parliament, not the Constitution, to take away the powers the people of Kenya gave us in the Constitution. And I'm thinking, Mr. Speaker, unless we are going to amend those laws and say to budget as representatives of the people, this lamentation book in the Bible will continue, and Mr. Speaker, it is something we need to take. Otherwise, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope by supplementary, as we contextualize, we will be able to perform our role better. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Burrell. Honorable members, I want to thank those members who have contributed so far. They have contributed profoundly, and I'm enriched. The House is enriched, Kenya is enriched by the contributions made by those members, and I hope those who will continue to contribute in the afternoon will also add value to this very important process. Honorable members, the time being 1:05 p.m., this House stands adjourned until today, Tuesday, 9th June 2020 at 2:30 p.m.